It is that time. All right, everybody. Welcome to the regular session of the Solvang City Council for Monday, August 9th. I'll call the meeting to order at 6:30. May we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember Clark,
Here.
Councilmember Infante,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Morona,
Here.
Councilmember Thomas,
Here.
Mayor Urick,
Here.
all present.
And Councilmember Infante, would you please lead us in Pledge of Allegiance?
With me, if you would, the hand over your heart.
I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. And it looks like we have no presentations or ceremonial items. Go right to public comments. Item number 1. Madam Clerk, would you please read the record of the statement about public participation?
Item number 1 is public communications, written or verbal. The council welcomes your input. At this time, you may address the council on items not on the agenda or consent agenda. Time limit is 3 minutes.
All right, we'll start with in-person. Please state your name and your residence.
Thank you, Mayor Hurwig. My name is Lansing Duncan, and thank you for the opportunity to address you this evening. Last Monday, the Planning Commission looked at the latest proposal for the old lumberyard site, which combines residential and hotel development. Because I couldn't attend, I wrote the Planning Commission a fairly detailed letter, and I've asked staff to distribute that to you now. Solvang needs to take the time to look this gift horse in the mouth very carefully. At first glance, it may look a lot better than the rundown nag of a project that the developer tried to force you to buy with affordable housing and SB 330. But that was just a ploy to stampede the city into rezoning the parcel for hotel development. There is simply far too much development proposed for this site. The new 2-story Mission Drive elevation is just window dressing. You need to look to the rear 2/3 of the parcel to see how overbuilt it is. That's why there remains a parking deficit despite using a multi-story automated parking structure partially buried in the ground. I don't think you can find a precedent for this sort of development in Solvang. I don't think you can in the valley. I don't know if you can in the county in terms of this much density on this small parcel. If you look at the section drawings, this gives you an idea of what's happening. The previous hotel project for this site had 86 rooms, along with 14 condo hotel units, and provided 74 on-site spaces with a deficit of 44 parking spaces. This proposal now has 92 rooms, along with 43 apartment units. Although there's supposedly 124 parking spaces and a deficit of 34 parking spaces, most of them are in the automated stacked parking structure. There only appear that I could read on the plan something like 26 at-grade spaces. This is pretty strange because they say that all the residents' 53 spaces that they need to have are satisfied on site. Those residents are going to use this automated stacking thing? I sort of doubt it. Also, oversized vehicles aren't going to fit in it. People who want to come to maybe just the restaurant, are they going to use it? So the previous hotel project had a total of 100 rooms and units, while this one has a total of 135 rooms and units. It's clear that at least 2/3 of the site is dedicated to the hotel with its circulation, parking, pool, restaurant, etc. There is no acknowledgement that siting 43 apartments on the site requires downscaling of the hotel and its facilities. If you look at the size of the residential units proposed, they've been dramatically reduced. Now, the plan shows 500 and 700 square feet. The developer spoke about 300 square feet. Previously, residential units were proposed to be 1,000 or 1,100 square feet. There are plenty of amenities in the hotel: pool, restaurant, fitness center, but no amenities in this man camp. No playground, barbecue area, recreation area. Wait, the developer proposes to have Murphy beds in those 300 square foot units. 300 square feet, remember, is 3/4 of a 2-car garage. This is a site with constrained access in an area with severe traffic problems. The solely residential project would create traffic problems. The hotel project would create more problems, and combining the two with a larger hotel creates an even larger traffic problem. Not having SB 330 project allows for more review, but that requires a critical eye. Rezoning the site for a hotel project only makes sense if the hotel project fits the site. If all 43 residential units are retained on site, this hotel project does not fit. To your credit, your council did not buy the outrageous proposal that included $5 million in TOT abatement. Not asking for that now makes this project look better, but that's a smokescreen. This project is equally outrageous because of its density. Don't buy any project that doesn't truly fit this very important gateway to solving. My apologies for the breathless presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Duncan. Appreciate those comments. And is there anyone else that would wish to speak in public comment time right now? Seeing none in-house, see someone, I can't read what it says.
We
On
have
Zoom.
one person with raised hand on Zoom, and it says Galaxy Tab A.
Yeah, that's me.
If you can, please go ahead and state your name.
My name is Robert Pelcher, and I live on Chalk Hill Road. Mr. Mayor, City Council members, thank you for listening to me. I want to talk to you about a matter that was brought up at the last meeting. I was not able to attend and give my input due to other commitments. I think the city needs to move forward with a bypass route around Stalling, whether it be connecting Fjord to 246 or a whole different route off of Santa Rosa Road to Alamo Tenatado. Solving is a destination town. People don't just discover it by driving through. If you sit downtown on 246 and watch the traffic, you will notice there's a lot of traffic just trying to get through. Cement mixers, large trucks hauling hay, and not to mention the shoe mesh buses. I believe a majority of the traffic going it either way just wants to get to the other side. By making a bypass for those just wanting to get through, it would create a much more pleasant environment to enjoy. No one wants to eat a meal or enjoy a nice glass of wine with traffic idling right next to them and smelling their exhaust. The reduction of traffic would be a great benefit to both residents and visitors. Connecting Fjord would be the easiest way, but it would not benefit much except for the people that live in that neighborhood, because they would not have to drive through town to get to 101. It needs to go all the way to Alamo Tenatado. By not moving forward this, you will adversely affect many more people than those in the Fjord neighborhood. I live on Chalk Hill Road. We see cars fly by at speeds in excess of 70 miles an hour at times. We are a neighborhood of family with houses on both sides of the street, not like Fjord, only on one side. The speed limit is 35 miles an hour. By not moving forward with this, you will be affecting those that live in Steep Mesa, Chalk Hill Road, Friedensburg Canyon, and Viborg. That is way more than the Fjord neighborhood. Let me remind you that the sheriff's report at the last meeting, he stated in 1 week there were 22 citations in these areas. I talked to a sheriff's officer, asked him if there's anything he could do about controlling the speed on Chalk Hill, and he told me not much, because they don't have a radar gun, and the only way to get anybody for a speed is to travel behind them. Again, by not having a bypass around the city, you have created one through our neighborhood, and that was evident with the incident that happened this morning on Mission. This ended up having traffic in my front yard. Lastly, I feel Mr. Clark should recuse himself because it is obvious he is influencing others with what is good for him and not the city. Mr. Infiniti stated that a bypass would not help the traffic through town. This is crazy. Reducing the number of drive-through traffic would definitely lighten the traffic. With the lumberyard project moving forward, that will add more to the gridlock in the city. Mr. Peterson on the Planning Commission stated that we definitely need a bypass around the city. Now is the time to act on this. With the imminent approval of the federal infrastructure bill and the aid of the neighboring towns in the Hvac, we should really step forward and move on with this. Thank you for listening to me.
Thank you for your comments.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question. SO doesn't have access to a radar gun?
They do have a radar gun.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Looks like there's one more.
We have another speaker. Next one up is Sheila on Zoom. Please go ahead. State your
Hello,
name.
City Council. I was at that I wasn't at. I watched and I listened to the Planning Commission, and I stated my objections to the St. George project, his newest version of a project, because of what it's going to do to our traffic. I can't discuss a bypass because I don't know what that would be all about. But somebody at the Planning Commission mentioned putting underground parking. I don't know who it was, but I can tell you with unequivocally, the Hvac need to be contacted. People lived on that property for years, and you start digging there, you could come up with ruin a lot of artifacts. Maybe the Hvac won't care, but they need to be contacted, and they need to know what is going on here. Our traffic is horrible, absolutely horrible. I won't even go to the post office on a Saturday, and I try not to go Friday, Saturday, Sunday, because the traffic and the tourists, they take over. And I, as a member of the community, stay home. And during the week, it isn't always great either. The traffic every single day is horrible. And if you allow this project to go forward, you are just adding to the problems that we've got. I rest my case.
Thank you, Sheila. Appreciate the comments. Is anyone else out there in Zoom? If you want to raise your hand or speak right now, otherwise I'll bring it back to council.
No more speakers.
No more speakers, okay. I did want to mention, if I had the name correctly, Mr. Pelcher. The Sheriff's Department does have a radar, LiDAR, although the problem is that not all of the deputies that work there are certified to be able to use it. So it is a little bit problematic at times, but it is available for any of them that do get certified. On another note, it may be something that maybe we would want to request the
Write a
deputy
letter.
that actually works.
Yeah,
we
write a
can
letter to
work
the
that
sheriff
out.
and ask if he could certify the people because
Yeah.
of this particular issue, and not only on Chalk Hill, but throughout the city.
Right, yeah, but maybe, we would only be having people that work in the patrol for solving that would only be certified, so they could do a little bit of both. Might be something to look into, so.
I agree.
just Food for thought, because I know right now we can't afford necessarily a motor officer, but that might be a good remedy, short-term and long-term, for
Okay.
what we have right now. Anyway, thank you again for your comments, Mr. Pelcher. We'll now move on to the city manager report.
Okay, good evening, Mayor and Council. Today we start with going a little bit back in time. As you can see us all wearing masks in this council meeting. Our county, the Santa Barbara County, this is not the state mandate at this point, but is our county mandate now requires by a new health order, which was issued last week and went into effect on Friday the 6th at 5 p.m., which requires face coverings to be worn when indoors, whether you're vaccinated or not. I'm seeing some of the businesses and establishments in our city that are complying with this and some that are not. But for more information, this is something that's enforced by the county. And for more information, please go to the county website, their public health, at countyofsb.org PhD to read through the health order and understand the information and the requirements. With that, more effects that are coming out of some of the changes that are coming through with the COVID-19 cases and the spread of the new Delta variant. There's still no guidelines with the tiers as there used to be before, and so there's no restrictions for events currently. Events are still allowed and the masks are only required indoors but not outdoors. However, because of some of these developments with COVID-19 and the increases in cases, the Danish Days Foundation has canceled the Danish Days for this year, which was originally scheduled for September 17 and 18. Now, the city has a contract with IDK, a marketing contractor, through the end of December, and we are working with them. Part of their scope is to have a fall event. So we're continuing to work with IDK to develop different recommendations for some type of fall event, which may now coincide with the dates that were originally planned for the Danish Days, as we already have a number of groups that were already coming to town and have booked their stays for that weekend. So if possible, we will develop options that are scalable, that can scale up and scale down to kind of fill that void of not having the Danish Days event. The city is also continuing to have music in the park on every Wednesday at 5 p.m. And then a kind of an exciting shout out to Solving for being Solving and just naturally attracting different events to the city of Solving. We had a direct request from Disney to potentially host an event next year in 2022 in the fall, which would be called Solving or something along those lines, but basically featuring Frozen in Solving, because Frozen, which is the popular kids movie by Disney, originally was based off of the Hans Christian Andersen tale, The Snow Queen. So you see a picture there of the Hans Christian Andersen that we have in our Solving Park, and Disney is definitely recognizing those traditions and the Danish heritage and this famous tale writer that is here in Solving. So they want to work with us as a city, as a destination to highlight the Frozen, which should be a really great marketing opportunity for the city of Solving. So we look forward to that and definitely hope that there would be no masks in 2022. A reminder, once again, I spoke about this last time, that we plan to have the State of the City on Saturday, the August 28th. There is some flexibility with the State of the City given the COVID-19 conditions to where people can attend in person at the city or at the Veterans Hall Memorial Building. And they can also do it by Zoom if they don't feel comfortable coming in due to COVID. So this would be an event that will highlight the accomplishments or look back at Solving's accomplishments over the last year, look at the state of the city today, and then talk about some of the exciting projects that are coming up. This event is sponsored by both the city and the Chamber of Commerce. There is a flyer that went out this week by mail, alerting all of the utility customers in the city that this is taking place. You don't need to have a reservation. And at this point, we don't have limitation on how many people can attend, although, of course, with COVID-19, that may change, and we also encourage those who want to attend by Zoom this meeting. Now, moving on to the general plan update. The GPAC, the General Plan Advisory Committee, and the DRC have been working on vision and guiding principles. Vision and guiding principles are the broad policies, the broad vision for what would Solving look like 20 years ago. So before we looked at existing conditions and trends, which is posted on the plansolving.com dedicated website, And now we have the discussion about the vision and guiding principles. DRC and the Hvac had the input from the community from the first 2 workshops. They considered that and created a draft version that will be going to the council and the planning commission as a joint session at the next council meeting on August 23rd. So the vision and guiding principle has just been distributed publicly via the website. It's now on the website at plansolving.com. There was an email blast that went out to those who signed up for notifications for this website, and this allows the community to have some extra time before the agenda is posted to review the vision guiding principles and provide with any feedback, and please attend, of course, the August 23rd joint session, which is when the Planning Commission and the City Council will be discussing adoption of this vision guiding principles, which will then be the overall overarching policies that we will follow in terms of the technical review and the development of all of the elements of the general plan. So the alternative choices workshop number 3 is tentatively scheduled for November 4th, and that will be the discussion about from where we are today, the existing trends and conditions, how do we achieve through this long-term planning documents and policies, the vision and the guiding principles of the community of Solving. Once again, reminding that the Copenhagen Drive closure survey is out there and open. It will continue to be open through August 17th. The results will be presented to council at the August 23rd meeting. We also have in the same postcard that went out alerting everybody to attend the State of the City. We've sent out a note that this survey is open, requesting businesses to fill out the business survey and residents to fill out the resident survey. So we're going to give them some time to fill this out. There's QR codes for those who want to use the phone to easily access it. Or if anybody wants to fill out a paper form, we also have those available here at City Hall, and we can assist anyone that needs assistance in filling this out. This is the considerations for council decision as to whether the Copenhagen Drive closure should remain post the current expiration date of August 31 of this year. Now, sign ordinance or enforcement. The City Council did at June meeting, June 28th, provide with direction to begin enforcement of the sign ordinance and essentially lift the relaxed regulations. So there was a letter that went out to businesses stating that the city would start enforcing the sign ordinance in its full enforcement as of August 1st. So we will be kicking that off a little bit more this week, and there will be proactive enforcement throughout the TRC. The code enforcement has already been notifying businesses. So for example, you see this chalkboard sign. We see some of those on the sidewalks. Those are no longer allowed. We're not enforcing this type of sign ordinance because of the COVID, and when the businesses were constantly having to change their open door policies based on being shut or open. But at this point, the city's sign ordinance is in effect, and all of the businesses will, in addition to the letter, be notified that they're in violation, asked to be in compliance, and if they don't come into compliance, we will be looking at further enforcement and citations. Once again, just a reminder that we are in drought stage 1. We'll be coming back with further recommendations. It is possible that the city will need to go to stage 2 as a preliminary matter. And we're definitely asking, especially the business sector and the residents, but hotels, et cetera, that are high users of water, to conserve. We need to meet the 15% reduction. We may look to further reductions, but at this point, we are not even meeting the 15% reduction for stage 1. So we are doing outreach to the community to conserve and constantly reminding as we may be looking at mandatory stage 2 drought recommendation for the City Council. On a more positive note, we have the city website redesign that will be kicking off. Most of the work will be taking place on the background before it's ready to roll out. But something that will be coming to the city council for consideration is a new recommended logo. We'll run that by staff ahead of time. We have some samples. We took into account the survey results. The survey results basically said that majority liked a windmill and a blue logo. Currently, we have a few different versions that are out there, so this would standardize potentially when we present it to you, and you will have a few options to consider. But the hope is that you would consider adopting or approving one of those logos as the City Hall official business logo, and we'll brand the entire website around that theme. The Tourism Advisory Committee is currently in recruitment. The deadline to submit application is still open through August 15th. It is pending your approval in today's agenda of the second reading of the ordinance. The reason that the TAC is being established is because the city of Solvang is a major tourist destination, and the city council has determined that tourism to the city of Solvang and the quality of life for the Solvang community would be enhanced through the creation of this committee. So this committee would be an advisory role to the city council to advise on all marketing matters. So for more information, anyone interested in applying can go to thecityofsolvang.com. On the front page, we have the application. Each council member, by the ordinance, if approved, would appoint one committee member and could also appoint as a majority 2 additional members to this committee. Now, city staff recruitments, just reaching out that we're very busy in terms of recruiting. Actually, the entire industry is very busy in terms of recruiting. It's the HR specialists are rather busy and scarce right now, but we do have 2 openings currently available on our city website. So if anyone knows anybody that's qualified or wants to apply, please go to our human resources page on the city website. We have the planning manager and the human resources manager is part-time currently available. We also have almost completed, and I consider to be successful recruitments for the city clerk and the assistant planner. Those are the priority positions, and those are expected to be onboarded within the next month and a half. We will have additional openings coming up based on the approved budget. Some of the opportunities will be internal only, and some will be external. So please keep an eye on our HR website. Moving on to the advanced calendar, as I mentioned, at the next council meeting, you will have a joint session with the Council and Planning Commission to discuss and adopt the vision and guiding principles. If you like that document, or you can make any modifications. We also have the second public hearing of the elections by district. You will be receiving all of the results of the Copenhagen Drive closure, and we will be looking for any policy direction you would like to provide to staff at that point. Tourism Advisory Committee member appointment, we will have the application process closed, and you will have an opportunity to appoint that committee, which will then work on all of the marketing items. We will be coming with recommendations for the drought, the wastewater treatment plant phase 3, recycled water, the city hall logo I just mentioned, and we also have an application for the electric trolley license application based on the ordinance that you had passed recently. Moving on into September, it will be heavy on marketing strategy month. We'll have the marketing update from IDK. We'll also talk about some parking improvements recommendations. And then we received the time period has closed for the visitor center RFP. We received 3 applications, and we'll be bringing that to you for contract approval as the current contract expires at the end of September. We'll also be coming to you, hopefully, with advice of the TAC with the marketing services RFP scope, so that contract can be formed before December 31st. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you very much. Are there any questions of the report?
Yes, please.
Councilmember Infante.
The last comment on there said that you'd be going out with an RFP that would take advice from the TAC, the TAC. But the TAC that we're going to get the reading on says that they don't start till January.
No, the TAC would be effective 30 days from today, if you approve that item, which is on the consent agenda.
Well, but if you look at that, it says starts in January. That's what's in the document. That's in the consent agenda.
So the intent of the ordinance, it does say that the term of office for members shall be 2 years and it shall expire on December 31st. The intent, I believe, in council setting this up was to install members as soon as possible with the expectation that they would start their duties immediately.
That was my understanding,
Okay.
but that's not what it says in the ordinance, and that's why I'm confused.
So the terms will begin as soon as they're appointed. They would just term out in January. That's the intent of it. Is there language specifically that you saw in there that gave you cause for concern other than the language about the term of the office?
There was no language that said it would start immediately, but the language said it would start in January. And that's my confusion.
Okay. Well, the TAC will be established, assuming council passes the ordinance. The TAC will be established 30 days afterwards. Under the appointment provisions, each council member can go ahead and appoint them ASAP. And then the term will be from January. That will be when December 31st will be when the term ends, and they'll need to be reappointed at that point. But they will take effect immediately upon being appointed by the city council.
Thank you.
I think for clarification, he may have been referring to underneath the organization and meetings, 2-4-3, parent A1, the Tourism Advisory Committee shall immediately upon its appointment and taking office at its first regular meeting after January 1 of each year.
Yeah, and we modeled this after existing boards and commissions, so that we wanted to have consistency as to when they would pick a chair. I would anticipate that once they are fully formed, they will go ahead and do that. And then at their first meeting in January, they will do that again if necessary.
Gotcha.
But we're starting midstream, so to speak, and because the council indicated a desire to get this up and moving as quickly as possible, the council will have the power to appoint immediately rather than having to wait until January to appoint.
Thank you for the clarification.
All right, are there any other questions? All right, seeing none, we'll go to council comments, requests in advance calendar. Are there any comments of the council at this time? Councilmember Clark.
I just want everybody to know that I'm very, very well aware that if anything happens or is voted upon on Fjord Drive, I of course would be recusing myself. And I received some emails this week about comments that I had made at the last meeting. I was stating an opinion, and I probably should have shut my trap. But I do know that I would have to recuse myself from anything that affects within 500 feet of where I reside. So I just want people to know that. And the Fred Cobalt service was beautiful, and if my kids speak about me the way his kids spoke about him, I'll think that I've done something well in life. That's it.
Glad you could make that. Councilmember Thomas.
Mayor Uhrig and I, and perhaps the other three council people, I don't know, had the opportunity to get a tour of the Solvang Senior Center and the plans for their expansion. And I thought it was a very well done proposal. The need is there. 37% of the county is in that senior capacity, as I certainly am. And what they are trying to do is expand it to offer more services, more food, more opportunity for interaction with seniors, many of whom live alone, and that might be the only opportunity that they have to interact with other people. It's expensive. They're looking for a $3 million price tag to build on this center and make it the most. And I just put it out there to the people that have seniors, know seniors. Try and support them as best as you can, and perhaps somebody out there might like a naming opportunity might be able to help them out.
All right, any other comments? Councilmember Infante.
I would second that. I did get a tour, actually, Mayor Pro Tem Arona and I were out at the senior center and got a tour through it. Would second that completely. One administrative comment, I would appreciate if you put the page numbers back on the agenda.
My apologies if they dropped off. And we do have city clerk incoming. But yes, we'll put those on the agenda.
All right. My comments are similar to what I've usually done, is kind of giving you updates on the food bank. And I didn't get numbers this past week. So they had taken a break after our last council one 2 weeks ago, so they actually got a well-deserved break. They started last week again, and right now I do know that they put out a call for volunteers to help out with it tomorrow, anytime. Get a hold of Pastor Chris Brown from Bethania or Linda Marzullo. Both of them are the coordinators for that, and they were really looking for some extra volunteers to help out with that food distribution tomorrow. And I also wanted to announce again, I got this from Tracy Beard, the director of the chamber, that they are giving out masks. These are reusable masks. They have them in boxes, in crates, whatever the schools could use, the hospitals, anyone for your business, especially right now that it's required for anybody going indoors again. They are going to be giving them out tomorrow from 11 to 5 at Chomp, right in the middle of the area there. So kind of the back part of Chomp. Anybody that wants to get them between 11 and 5 tomorrow. And it's first come, first served. Again, any of the businesses out there, the hospitals, the schools that are around the valley. I know they've given them out to a few of the schools out in Los Olivos, but sure like to make sure all of our students here coming up, especially this week for the high school, that they're starting back in session on Thursday. And the following week, they'll be starting in Solvang. So those are needed, and thank you, Tracy and the chamber, for getting those for the community. The other announcement would be that on Wednesday, we have more music in the park. Cadillac Angels will be there on Wednesday. And on the 18th, a week from this coming Wednesday, will be Sound Investment. Both of those are good bands coming up.
Soundgarden?
Not Soundgarden. No, Sound Investment. Could be a cover band for some Soundgarden stuff, though. Who knows?
That would have been in the news.
Yes. So that's going on with the chamber. And then on Friday this week, we will be doing our final movies in the park. Jenny and I will be there for Friday at Solvang Park. And we will be showing Bedtime Stories with Adam Sandler. It's a great little family movie. So hopefully we can get the community out there again. And I guess just to piggyback again on the council that have already made the comments regarding the senior center, it is a very great project going forward, and any private and public help to get that project rolling and finance would be greatly appreciated. Thank you. That's my comments, and I think we can move on to item number 5.
Actually,
Excuse me.
Mayor, if I may, a couple of comments. Getting back to the administrative issue with Councilmember Infante, I'm looking at the copy of the agenda. There's actually numbers on there. They're just maybe a little bit smaller this time, but they are there. Secondly, we have an item number 5, which is...
The page numbers aren't on the page itself.
Oh,
Oh, okay, sorry, I understand you now. Gotcha. We will make sure that those are there. That is very helpful. We have item number 5, which is a public hearing to receive input from the community regarding the creation of a district, which is time certain scheduled for 6:45. So I would just recommend that potentially you hear that item first before we go to the consent
and
agenda.
we make a motion to take out of order. We'll move council item number 5 to in front of the consent agenda. And we'll take the consent agenda right after. Can I have a motion for that?
I'll move that we change the arrangement of the agenda to accommodate that, yes.
Second?
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yurick.
Yes. All right, so that'll bring up item number 4 now. Can you read that?
Okay, so item number 4 is now the public hearing to receive input from the community regarding the creation of a district-based election system. We have a consultant here with us who will do most of the presentation. But for way of background, the City of Solvang on June 22, 2020 adopted a resolution number 2011-12 declaring intention to transition from at-large to district-based elections for the City Council, commencing with the next general municipal election in November of 2022. This requires a process to go through for the city in order to get there by the 2022 election. There's a total of 5 hearings that are required, and our consultant will go through this in more detail, but this is the first one of the 2 public hearings that will occur before the consultant and the city works on drawing the maps. There will be a dedicated website to this process that will be available to the community, and there will be opportunities for the community to review the maps before the City Council considers adopting and approving those. So this is the first hearing. The second hearing will be taking place at the next council meeting, November 23rd. You already have a contract executed with the National Demographic Corporation, who will be our consultant, who does a lot of this work throughout the cities in California. And with that, I would like to invite Daniel with NDC to make his presentation.
Good evening. Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Daniel Phillips, and I'm with National Demographics Corporation. And I am here tonight to walk you through the process of moving to a by-district election system. And I have a PowerPoint presentation that I'll show you here. So this is going to be an introduction to the districting process. So to begin, there are 3 possible election systems that a city like yours could have. The first is the one that you've had up till now, which is the at-large system, where city council members are elected by voters across the city. There is a second system that's kind of a hybrid system. It's called the from district system, where a city council member has to live in a certain district, but they are still voted on by residents across the city. The third system is called the by-district system, and that's the system in which a city council member not only has to live in a certain district in the city, but they can only be elected by voters in that district. And so it is that system, the by-district system, that the California Voting Rights Act, or CVRA, was written to specifically encourage. And so the CVRA, or California Voting Rights Act, was a law that was passed several years ago, but the basic thrust of it is that they make it much easier for jurisdictions like yourself to be held liable for racially polarized voting. And so they have reduced the number of proofs that are needed in order to be held liable. And so the basic thrust of it is that there are many hundreds of jurisdictions across the city, across the state, that have gone to court or have settled many of these lawsuits. And so you can see the number of dollars, hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars that have been spent trying to fight these lawsuits. And to this date, no jurisdiction has successfully fought a CVRA claim of racially polarized voting. And so in order to avoid spending so much money in order to fight or even settle one of these cases, jurisdictions like yourself have decided to move to the by-district system so that you aren't vulnerable to this sort of lawsuit. So the districting process looks like this, where you have 2 initial pre-draft hearings. These hearings take place before any release of any maps. And these are designed to educate on the process, solicit input from the public and you, the council, identify neighborhoods and communities of interest that should be kept together in a district. Then there's going to be later dates that have still to be determined, but there will be 2 post-draft map hearings. These will probably be in January or February of next year, and it will be these hearings where you will actually consider different map alternatives, because the official census data will be available, and we'll be able to present you with maps that have the correct data, and you'll be able to consider among these maps and then adopt one of these maps at a final map adoption hearing. So there are various federal, state laws that have to be followed in order to draw districts that are legally safe. The first block of law is federal law. And the first principle here is that the districts should be equal in population, meaning they have roughly the same number of people living in them. Not voters, but people, period. And then the second federal law to be mindful of is the Federal Voting Rights Act. Not to be confused with the California Voting Rights Act. The Federal Voting Rights Act is about making sure that you do not dilute the vote of certain protected class citizens, such as people who are from historically marginalized or disadvantaged communities. And so you try to respect those groups by not splitting them up into separate districts to the extent possible. But on the flip side, there is this stipulation that you not do what is called racial gerrymandering, which is where you make race or ethnicity the sole or most important factor when you're drawing your district lines. So that's the first block of criteria, the federal law. The second block is the state criteria. The California Fair Maps Act was actually passed recently that actually has a list of rank order criteria, meaning that the higher numbers are the ones that should be prioritized if you can't observe all of them. So the first, number 1, is that the district should be contiguous, which means that they're just one piece each. The second is that you avoid dividing neighborhoods or communities of interest, which are socioeconomic geographic areas that should be kept together. Third is that the lines follow easily identifiable boundaries, such as major roads or other significant boundaries. And fourth is that you draw the districts so that they are compact and that they do not bypass one group of people to get to a more distant group. And then you'll see that there's a final prohibition about not favoring or discriminating against a political party. And then if you look at the very right side of the screen, you'll see that there are other traditional districting principles. These are not mandatory. These are something that you may consider doing. The first of these is respecting voters' choices / continuity in office. The idea here is that you want to try to avoid parrying off to incumbent council members in one district so that you leave it to the voters to decide whether they earn a second term or another term and are not, one of them isn't forced out just because of the way the lines are drawn. The other principle is to account for any future population growth that you anticipate. You can intentionally underpopulate a certain district while not straying too far from equal population. If you're expecting like a future housing development that's going to add a lot of people in the next 10 years. So this slide shows a demographic summary of your city, and there's a lot of numbers here, and it might be hard to read some of them, but the basic idea I want to highlight is that there's just under 6,000 people that we estimate live in Solvang in 2020. And so if you divide that by 4 districts, so one district for each council member, that would be about 1,500 people living in each district. Another thing to highlight is the citizen voting age population. And this is an important data point when it comes to satisfying the Federal Voting Rights Act. So when just looking at those who are eligible to vote, 23% of your city's voting eligible population is Hispanic, and most of the remainder is white. Now, we have all of these data layers actually presented in visual form as maps in the interactive review map, which I hope to show at the very end of this presentation. So this slide just talks about defining neighborhoods, because one of those important state criteria is not dividing neighborhoods. So when we talk about defining neighborhoods, we like to ask two questions. First, what is a neighborhood? And second, what are its geographic boundaries? And so here you see examples of physical features that might define a neighborhood boundary. And so we're looking hopefully for public testimony about what are the important neighborhoods in the city that should be kept together. But if we don't get that, we can look at planning records and other similar documents to provide that definition. We also have this further term called communities of interest, which is slightly different from the idea of neighborhoods, because we're still talking about a geographic area like neighborhood, but we're also talking about a shared issue or characteristic that defines that area. Something, some social or economic interest that is impacted by city policies. So we want to hear if there are any communities of interest we should be aware of, what they are. And crucially, that second question, would it benefit from being included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation? The law only requires that if the answer to that second question is yes, that it be kept in one district, because the law recognizes that there may be communities of interest that would benefit more from having multiple representatives on the council. So if you believe that the answer to the second question is no, then we don't have to keep that community of interest in one district. So the interactive review map is something that we've set up for Solvang, and it's a simple tool for viewing multiple data layers at once and for reviewing draft maps once they are posted. And there's a link that we've established, and I'm hoping that once I finish up here, we can actually go to that link so I can show you visually what the crucial demographics are. But you see here the examples of some of the data layers that we have on that interactive review map. So this is my last slide. I just want to prompt discussion with these questions. What are the neighborhoods of the city, and what are their boundaries? Any other notable areas in the city that we should be aware of, like any communities of interest? And any questions about the interactive review map? So would it be possible to show them the interactive review map now? Yeah. Thank you. All right, so when you pull this up, you see that there is an instruction screen that comes up that you can close. And to the right, you see that there are different data layers. The first layer, and the only one that is checked right now, are the city limits, the city of Solvang city limits. But you can see there are other data layers. And I ask that you please check percent CVAP Latino. It's, yeah, right there. Yeah, so this layer shows the percent of the citizen voting age population that is Latino in Solvang. And the reason I bring this up is because this is a crucial data layer that will help you follow the Federal Voting Rights Act as you draw your district lines. And you can see that there is, the warmer the color, the higher the percentage of voting eligible Latinos in the city. And you can see that there's a higher concentration in this central part of the city, in the right around where the major commercial area is. Now, if you uncheck that layer and go to the City of Solvang zoning, which is just above that, you can see the that commercial area highlighted in red. If you want to actually see a legend for the colors that you're looking at, you can go to the very top left corner and you click on legend. And then that will show you what the different colors mean. And you can see that the darkest red is the tourist-related commercial area. And then the yellows represent residential areas, and orange is more higher density residential. And finally, if you want to change the base map, you can go to the base map gallery, which is just a little bit to the right there. And you can look at satellite if that appeals to you, or topographic, or there's several options there that you can look at, just whatever appeals to you. So this is just a sample of the amount of data we have. We also have elementary school attendance areas. If you were to go back to the layers button and scroll to the bottom of the list, you can see we have several demographics, and then you can see that there's elementary school attendance areas. You may want to uncheck the zoning so you can have a better sense of what that looks like. But you can see that the vast majority of the city is found in the attendance area for Solvang Elementary School, but there are small segments in other school attendance areas as well. So you're welcome to explore this and check out all the data we have, but I'm happy to answer any questions about this tool or the process in general, and also solicit input on communities of interest in neighborhoods. So thank you for listening, and I'll take your questions.
Are there any questions of the report?
Yes, please.
Of Mr. Phillips. Councilmember Infante.
I have 2 or 3 general questions. Looking at the document that you presented to us with the data in it, it shows that voter turnout for the city in the last election was about 2,600. So that's about, if we divide into 4 even districts, because we have 4 council members, that's about 600 or so per district. And if we go this district, what do we call it, moving into the by district, if I'm in District 1 and nobody votes in District 2, nobody runs for the seat in District 2, we end up with no council member from that district, and we're short a council member. What is the procedure at that point?
Your attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you would appoint someone who lives in that district to fill the seat.
That's generally going to be the case. You would have a vacancy. There are procedures set forth in the government code about how to fill a vacancy. There may be in the charter, I haven't looked at it in that context, but there may be provisions in there about how to fill a vacancy on the council. But you do point out the crucial question, or the crucial issue here, is that the districts will have very small population and a very limited population from a voting standpoint, and a very limited pool of candidates as well. That is a recognized issue in by-district elections, unfortunately. But the downside is, if you do not do this process, we do have at least a subtle threat of litigation against the city for failing to do so. So we're over a barrel.
I understand that we could get sued, and that's an issue, but I'm still trying to understand all of the ways this would work, because if we follow the rules, first off, we have a charter that says that we have a general election, right? It's at large. Do we have to change our charter?
Short answer is, you're going to have to take some action to implement a charter amendment on this. The action to be taken, however, is going to come before that, in that you have to go with the by-district elections before that. So you've got this interesting conflict between what you have to do to comply with the California Voting Rights Act and the threat, as well as what it says in the charter. So if you stick on the charter and just stay with the at-large elections, you run the risk of litigation.
Okay. Well, I have a very rude comment that I won't make. Thank you very much.
Oh, please.
If it involves
That's my
attorneys,
job.
I've heard most of them.
Councilmember Clark, did you
I have a question. What is the difference between this and congressional districts?
So congressional districts are those that are at the statewide level, there are 52 congressional districts.
Correct.
And each of them have about 750,000 people living in them.
But if you take, for example, Speaker Pelosi's district, goes from a housing project in Marin City to parts of Sausalito, across the Golden Gate Bridge, to parts of the Richmond, down 19th Avenue, and ends up in Hunters Point. How is that cohesive? I mean, districts like that, they're all over the state. I mean, I'm just picking hers because I know it, as well as Ron Dellum's old district and the East Bay, et cetera. Those are gerrymandered for votes, but that's okay. But I mean, and I'm okay with district elections, but that's okay. And we've got to change this.
Well, as far as I understand it, at the state level, with congressional districts, state legislative districts, those are drawn by an independent redistricting commission.
Which we're going through right now.
We're not doing a commission.
No. What I'm saying the county is. The whole
That's
state.
correct.
The whole state is doing it since the
Yes.
census. I understand that.
Yes.
But it's just like this is. I mean, you can't make a city district to look like one of those if you're trying to pick and choose to make sure you get the right numbers of people. It just seems complicated.
I mean, it depends how nefarious you want to be, but the idea of the state and federal criteria that I've laid out is the intent of it is to reduce gerrymandering or eliminate it by making it clear you do this, this, and this, and you draw districts that are at least theoretically fair.
Got it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing is with this, you only need to convince about 250 people to vote for you in this town to be on the city council.
Yeah, that was what I was gonna say. Now you only have to do your pitch to these amount of people. You don't have to target the whole
And
community.
you don't care what happens in a different part of the city.
Right.
You only care what happens to your neighbors, which to me, I just think for a town and I get it. I know this is who this attorney is out of Malibu.
Yeah.
He runs around suing everybody, and I don't want the city to spend a dime on it, which I've said from the previous council as well. But so obviously we're going to have to do this. But it just seems weird for such a small town to be chopped up like that.
And
And you don't care about what happens to the whole city.
And literally, if you look at the turnout on any particular off year that's not a national election, and how many people, we could get a council member elected with 10 votes.
Yeah.
I mean, or if I understand the law and our codes, I believe that if nobody goes from one of those districts, nobody runs, so we end up with a void, then we just get to appoint one, whoever we want, and that seems to violate all the district.
Kind of flips it on its head.
Yeah, it really, it's.
It is what it is, and we gotta do, anyway, we're sorry.
So my question is on, well, page 64, where it says beyond neighborhoods, defining your communities of interest. The second question is a little intriguing to me, and maybe I'm just being too simplistic about it, but would this community benefit from being included within a single district for purposes of its effective and fair representation? So does that mean I guess we always would have the option of not doing this until we get to the point we're gonna get sued? But,
We're at that point.
right there, that's a single district for solving. I mean, we're not really a large community. We are set up with some pockets of some of our voters of color, and there's only just that little area where the rest are, at least it appeared, maybe we need to do the other voter, the white voting part of it, if that's how we're trying to. It seems so ridiculous to me to have to break this down to race and all that type of stuff, when really, that's not what any of us are here about.
But it also, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, I apologize. Go ahead. No, you finish.
No, and so I was just wondering, with the second question here, does that mean that if we decide that it would benefit the community to stay as it is that what a single district means?
Your attorney can correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that would defeat the purpose of going to a by-district election system. The idea is you have one district for each council member.
And I, just so I can completely answer the question, where is the second question that you're seeing? I'm trying to find it on the slide.
On the, well,
You have page number.
on the page that I'm looking at is page 64, but it's underneath the topic beyond neighborhoods, defining communities of interest. It's it's the second
Okay.
question on there.
Okay, would this community benefit from being included within a single district? So I think what's anticipated there is there, for example, the TRC area, you have a higher concentration of Latino voters in that. Would that community benefit from being included in that district? So if you drew a line around the 2 red and 2 orange in that, would that community benefit from being included in a single district rather than splitting it to the 2 oranges or the 2 reds in that situation? I think that's what it's supposed to get at, because if you think about the purpose of the California Voting Rights Act, it's to make the city council have at least an opportunity to resemble the community that is voting in. And so if you have a concentrated geographic area with a particular type of group, they should have an equal opportunity to elect someone that more closely reflects them. That's the concept. In practice, it's way more messy than that.
It appears to be. And, you know, whether that area right there that you just brought up, does that even have enough voters?
I don't even live in that area, I'm going to say. Because that is the group that I would identify with, but I wouldn't get the chance to represent them. So.
Can we just all identify as Solvang residents?
Yeah.
Yeah. I'd like to know if I could ask another question.
Absolutely.
What have you run across, obviously this isn't your first rodeo, what have you run across with other cities of this size and how they've dealt with it, et cetera, and what are some of the pitfalls and the benefits you've seen?
So, to be honest, this is my first, this is my
his first rodeo.
Welcome. Well, welcome to the show.
Yeah, I mean, this really only happens every 10 years, although there are occasional mid-decade projects. But we are working currently with Buellton as well, and they may even be smaller than your city, I think. We have, so it's not just it's not just you who are going through this. There's a lot of small cities that are, none of them are doing it willingly, but it's just what they had to do, and they're making the best of it, and they're trying to, you know, follow this process as the law lays out, and we try to help them through that. And we identify those areas that we think they need, that we would recommend that they keep in one district, not divide between different districts, because that would leave them vulnerable to a legal challenge. But we have worked with hundreds of jurisdictions over decades, and we have not had one plan that has been adopted thrown out by a court. So we're very experienced in this, and we have a lot of expertise about how to do this well and how to make sure that you're safe and protected, and we'll do everything we can to do that.
Thank you. Are there any other questions?
Yeah, thank you. It says no racial gerrymandering, I'm not sure. You showed the map that had the Hispanic neighborhood. Is it the intention that would be a district because they are Hispanic? Or is it the intention that we don't do that and break it up another way?
Okay, so I'll do my best to explain this, and your attorney can add to what I say if he wishes. So it's a kind of a delicate dance. So you want to look and consider race or ethnicity, and do everything possible to not split them up in a way that dilutes their voting power, which would probably be drawing a line right through the middle of that cluster. But you don't want to do racial gerrymandering, which is to finagle the lines and do really bizarre looking things that don't really account for any other explanation besides race or ethnicity, where you just draw this district that makes no sense otherwise, other than to pack as many minority voters into it as possible. So that's kind of the two things you delicately balance. Does that help?
Yeah,
Okay.
there's no Italian neighborhood, I'm out.
And I think, just to add to what he said, when, for example, if you take a look at the way North Carolina's 12th congressional district was drawn many years ago and up until the most recent one, it was very clear from where those lines were. It was down to, I think, census block, not just neighborhoods, not just zoning, but down to block by block in a census where the line was drawn to ensure a particular result. The fine dance is making sure that you don't go to that extreme and on the other extreme, just ignoring it altogether. So somewhere along those lines, you're going to draw a bigger line that's not super squiggly around each census block. And so that's the challenge. And that's why there's this public process that goes on, is because the community may know better from a neighborhood basis what the identity of interest is, what the makeup is. You may know your neighbors better than you know the rest of the city. And so they may be able to provide additional information that factors into how these maps will ultimately be drawn when we get to that point. So that's why we have these public hearings and explain the process.
We can literally end up, I'm voting for one person and the guy across the street's voting for another person.
Absolutely.
And we can't vote for either way. It's just cool.
In a city this size, it just, to me, it doesn't make sense, but again, it's like you got these little warring factions. There's little 4 groups, and it's only for what's the best interest of that one group, not what's the best interest for everybody in Solvang. And I've been beating this like a dead horse. Sorry, PETA. It's one city. All of us want to do what's best for everyone in this town, not for my neighbors, not for the TRC, but for everyone. And it just seems to throw that out the window. So, what are you going to do?
Really, probably a stupid theoretical question, but what if somebody in a district, nobody runs?
Well, Mark just said that.
Yeah, we don't get a city councilman, we have to appoint.
I don't think that'll
Isn't it a
happen.
point?
Person, really?
And it would.
Wow.
If you think about it, we only do 2 city council members every 2 years.
Yeah.
So there's only 2 people that have to run for whatever 2 districts that they might represent.
Oh, that's right. It won't be 4 districts this
No,
next
it'll
time.
be 4 districts, but only 2 at a time.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you 2
Yeah.
are up for election in the next election next year.
And all I have to do is try and convince 55 people that
Yeah.
I'm the right guy for the job.
Yeah,
Cool.
nothing to this business.
I have cash for that. Oh, sorry. It's nutty. You know, the state of California is really good at telling corporations what their gender makeup of their board should be. You think the state would get involved in something like that and say, look, just get over with. You gotta have this, 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 this. And then we're fine. We're good to go.
But I think, Jim, in all honesty, it's likely that we might end up without a city council member in one election because nobody runs from that district.
Here's another case. We live in basically the same neighborhood. I would assume we'd be in the same district. I'm up in 2 years, he's got 4.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Which one gets kicked out?
Oh, interesting.
So,
The guy who gets in first. Oh, sorry, it's my district.
Bye.
So you have
Do
2
you-
people
do you know how that
representing the
works?
same district.
But he's up next year.
Yeah, but you'd have 2 people, if he gets reelected, then you're both representing, and that's technically your district.
Right.
You both represent that same district.
Then how could he run?
How does that work?
So the main principle that I want to make clear is that you finish out your term regardless. So that's you were elected to serve a 4-year term, and no matter what happens, you will finish that 4-year term. Now, as far as if 2 incumbent council members should end up in a district and they're on different cycles, then you'd have to decide when the seat's going to be up, whether it will be up in 22 or 24, and there will be consequences to either of those decisions. Now, I did say in my slide about criteria that there is that 3rd block of considerations, and one of those considerations is to draw the districts in such a way that you do not pair up 2 incumbent council members and leave it to the voters to decide whether they have earned re-election. Now, that is tertiary to the federal and state criteria, but is assuming that we can draw districts that satisfy the federal and state criteria, we can then make that a consideration if the council prefers.
Confusing.
Start raising money now, Mark.
This is an attorney's get-rich scheme.
Well, and to underscore that, I believe the Shankman firm has requested from Santa Monica something like $22 million in attorney's fees for that fight, because Santa Monica has battled. They recently, if I remember the case correctly, they had a success in it, but it wasn't a total success. But the stakes are very high. Palmdale spent north of $4 million in attorney's fees, and then they had to pay a settlement as well. So I don't want to minimize the risk to the city by any means. It is difficult. Would we be doing this in the absence of a threat letter? I would say zero chance of that. But there's also the possibility of spending millions of dollars in defense and not a dollar for tribute.
So the city has received a letter?
Yes, it has.
It already has?
It has already.
And that's what spurred this on 2 years ago
Correct.
to get it started, okay.
You didn't get to see that one? Because the letter came in and it made the whole point.
That doesn't matter.
It's there. We'll get you a copy.
And he makes his living. Even without, he's still gonna get some money out of this, if I'm not mistaken.
They're
Just-
actually, I'd rather not discuss that in open session.
Got it,
I can speak with you offline why that's the case.
okay. It's been in the news about other cities that even just by him suing, he's guaranteed some money to come out of this. And he just keeps working the state. Of course he's from, never mind.
Okay. Is there any other comments of the council at this time? We'll take it out for public comment now. And do we have in-house, Matt?
I just had a question. Is a hybrid system allowed?
Come to the podium, please.
Okay. I just had a question. I was wondering if a hybrid system is allowed. So for example, 2 districts and 2 at-large council members.
I can probably address that. The unanswered question is similar to that. Can you have an at-large mayor and 4 districts? That is still being debated, but having a hybrid where you have 3 at-large and 2 by district, that has not been litigated that I'm aware of. It's all centering around the at-large election of a mayor rather than having a district-elected mayor. So that, I anticipate we're just looking at 4 districts plus an at-large mayor, but that seems to be acceptable to the parties who have threatened litigation against the cities, because it would be practically impossible to figure out how to do an elected mayor by district. If you think about the mental gymnastics that would be necessary to do that, how do you even do that? So that, I think, has been the default.
I think I can tell you how to do that. You would just go to the way some cities have done it with rotating, where everybody's a mayor for a year. And if it ever came down to that, you would just basically take, it wouldn't really, you would do the round table of mayors, if you will, because I think
Right.
Solvang used to actually do that.
Solvang used to do that, but since we've made that change, then the question is, since that change is in effect, it's a directly elected mayor at large as opposed to by district. I just can't think of a way how you would directly elect a mayor by district, because there's only one mayor.
I know, and I do believe
May-
that.
may-
I'm okay with that, because the city as a whole should pick the mayor.
Yeah.
I was thinking you could do it like they do at the electoral college, that each district votes for which one, and then
Electoral votes.
whoever gets the most votes, that's the vote that goes for mayor.
It's like the Board of
But then you have
Supervisors.
4 districts, so then you don't have a quorum to do that.
Or 5 districts, whoever gets the most votes becomes the
Right.
mayor.
It would
Well-
basically be going back to
Like the
Yeah.
just the 5.
Board of
yeah,
Supervisors
5
have five supervisors, and they rotated,
Yeah.
for the chair every year.
Interesting.
Anyway, we just have to do it. We can talk all night about the inconsistencies about this.
All right, so any comments in-house? I don't see any. We'll take it out to Zoom. First I see up is Nancy Emerson.
Good evening, Mayor Burry and council members. I want to just talk about a number of things that have come to mind as a result of this issue coming to the fore. I wanted to ask the consultant how many census tracts and blocks we have in Solvang, first of all. And after my remarks, maybe he can answer that. It seems to me the simple solution would be just to divide the city into 4 sections using Highway 246 and Alisol or Otterdog roads, but how close would that come to achieving 4 districts with about 1,500 residents each? I don't know. When you look at multifamily housing, it's located north of 246, it's located south of 246. There's some over on Alamo Pintado, and there's a little east of Alisol, just south of the court. Seniors are concentrated at Otterdog Village, between Otterdog and Alisol, at the mobile home development near the river on Fjord, south of 246 and west of Otterdog, and in Mission Oaks, east of Alisol and north of 246. So they're in 3 of the 4 quadrants described above. Will census data enable us to determine how concentrated families with school-aged children are in any of the 4 quadrants of the city, or how concentrated certain ethnic, educational, or economic levels are in various quadrants? There really is very little or no cheap housing in Solvang. Simply having districts with only about 1,500 people rather than 6,000 people does make it easier time-wise and economically for people to run for elected office, especially those who have less access to funds for running a campaign and or time to go door to door to talk with people. And it seems that one goal of those pushing cities to divide into districts was to enable more diversity among elected officials, both economic and racial. Some neighborhoods, when you talk about communities of interest, are very impacted because of traffic problems. But that's a widespread problem, so I can't see us getting that into one community of interest. Maybe it's helpful to have everybody having problems. And some streets do feel threatened by new developments, but none of those are large enough to have a block of voters for a community of interest. We've got people who favor more tourism and some favor less, but I don't think you could get any way of making that a community of interest. When you look at the residential areas, most of them in Solvang do not have homeowners association. I'm aware that Mission Oaks has a homeowners association and Village Collection, and I'm not sure about Alisol Ranch. But unlike some cities, we don't have established neighborhood organizations or homeowners associations that might become communities of interest. So I think we're wrestling with a really interesting question, and I realize that it's very personal for those of you on city council and a little more intellectual exercise for the rest of us. But I'm interested in following it and really glad to have a well-qualified consultant on the job to help through this.
Thank you for your comments, Nancy. Sheila, you're next.
Yeah, mine is more of a question. Is this mandated? Maybe it's to our city attorney, I don't know. Is this mandated? Does this have to happen?
I'll let our city attorney answer that, but yes.
Short answer is no, it doesn't have to happen, but the city risks significant cost and litigation if it doesn't go through this process. So I never like to tell you that you have to do something. I will tell you what the ramifications are if you don't do something.
But a city the size of Solvang, it seems to me, no matter how you split it up, the Hispanic community is never gonna move where it's at. How you split it up, we are not a real diverse town, yet we are, in some ways. And for 6,000 people, to divide up approximately 1,500 each, and of course the mayor would be at large. I don't know how you could do it any other way, other than take turns like the county supervisors do. I don't know, it sounds like a terrible idea to me, but that was my question, and I don't like it.
Thank you for your comment. I do not see any others unless some are raising hands and I can't see because your video is off. There are a few out there. So seeing no one else, we'll bring it back for final comments on the report.
I have a comment or a question.
Councilmember Clark.
Mr. Phillips, what was the exact wording of the state? Because the state came out with a directive. What is the exact wording? Because they were talking about when Ms. Benedict asked our city attorney, does the city have to do this? And he said theoretically no. But what was the wording that the state came out with that is having cities do this?
So the California Voting Rights Act, it stipulates that the by-district system is the one where there's no forum for being legally challenged if you have that system.
So I mean, this to me, it's like, okay, it either the state says it is or it isn't, and it's like technically it's not a law, but we have to do it.
It's not forbidding it.
$7 million.
You're right. It's not forbidding by-district elections. It's encouraging it, but
if you don't do it, it's going to cost you millions.
Yes.
Okay. That makes complete sense in California. Thank you.
And just in a quick summary, the Voting Rights Act prohibits the use of an at-large election in a political subdivision if it would impair the ability of a protected class to elect candidates of its choice. That's what the CVRA stands for. Add to that the complexity of a lawyer saying your at-large elections are impairing the rights of this particular block of voters. That's where this comes from. So the state is not imposing this on us, but the private law firms who are litigating against cities are alleging that the cities and other districts, it's not just cities, that their at-large elections are impairing that group's ability to elect representatives. So the long and the short of it is the state set the rule, private parties are enforcing it.
Interesting.
All right, thank you. Is there any other comments, final questions? All right, thank you, Mr. Phillips, appreciate
You're
your
welcome.
presentation.
Thank you.
That's for informational item only, so there's no motion that needs to be made, so our next action would be going to item number 5, consent agenda.
Item number 5 is consent agenda. Approval of agenda as presented, approval of minutes of regular city council meeting on July 26, 2021. Receive warrant register for the months of July 2021. Receive fire department activity report for the months of April through June of 2021. Notice of completion Santa Ynez Valley Transit Bus Stop 8 upgrades. HCA Park reservation fee waiver. Second reading of an ordinance establishing the membership terms of the office, duties, and organization of the Tourism Advisory Committee.
Right, is there any items that any council members would like to pull?
Yes.
Okay,
Now, I don't know about pull or just correct. For instance, the minutes has a typo in it. It's a correction if we do that, and, well, let's go through that one. Shall we go through that first?
Yes.
The approval of the minutes, if you look on page 2 of 6 of the minutes, because I don't have an overall page number, it says council requests. It said that I made a comment about the groundwater sustainability agents for the, it says Management A area. It's the EMA, which is the Eastern Management Area. And we'll find the next one. Oh, the consent agenda doesn't list the approval report for the finances. And I've got a couple questions about that. Should that be addressed here or at some other point?
Is that item now 5C, receive warrant register?
Warrant register, sorry, it is there, my apologies. Okay, if you take a look at that one, and if you go to page 3 of 22, it lists on there 4 United States Treasury tax penalties.
Yeah, that's,
Did you notice that?
yes, it did.
$6,000 approximately we paid for, it says, a tax penalty. Why did we pay a tax penalty?
There's 3 of those, actually.
4 of them.
I'm happy to discuss that
2019,
with you
Q3, and so on and so
offline.
forth. Yeah,
Looks like it has to do with FICA.
Yeah, there was a number of different, it would be a very detailed answer that I don't have right now, which I do have those records, and I'm happy to discuss with you offline.
it would, yeah, I'd like to see a report on that sent to me, please.
Of course.
Because that's ridiculous that we're paying tax penalties because we don't pay them on time. Is that what happened? Sorry, that's just not right.
Any other comments on our items? I had a couple, I guess, related to the same. I saw 3 of those and then went back to the summary, and it was listing FICA as part of that. So if I could actually, I'd like to see what that is as well, because it is addressing some penalties from 2019 and 2020.
Yeah.
Quite a bit of money there, if you add it all up. And,
Yeah, I believe it was about $15,000 all in total.
yeah. I'm trying to think of, oh, the other one that I noticed on there was, I guess it's on page 15 underneath. There's showing a Public Works Department /INV, and it's for Van Dermyden Makis or Law Company. There's 2 invoices, one from April, one from May. One is for $14,871, and another one is for $20,697.98. Who is Van Dermyden?
So this would be part of your risk management program, and that is not something that can be discussed in open session.
Okay.
It's a personnel matter.
Okay. All right, and then, let's see, page 18, excuse me, archive social media. What do we're paying a separate company to archive our social media?
Yes, so we do have a Facebook account that was established roughly 2.5 years ago, and there are precise requirements for archiving social media for municipalities. So if you have a social media account, then you have to have that type of service to archive it.
So So that's something that the city is responsible for paying. Wouldn't that be part of our maybe media contact or contract?
We don't have, well, the social media, which is primarily Facebook, and we also have a not very used Instagram account, is owned by the city. It's city's data, and it's the city's responsibility to archive that data.
So $4,700 for archiving.
That is probably, if it's $4,700, I'm not sure where you're looking. That sounds like an annual subscription.
Yeah, it didn't mention that. It just says social media archiving / risk is what it came up with in the vendor name in the description on page 18 of what I see of page 18. It's $4,776. I just wondered if that's a monthly. I didn't notice it before. It's the first time.
It would not be monthly. No, that's. I'm happy to follow up with that information for you.
I appreciate that. I think those are the items on that for the warrant register. And then, is there any other items that need to be pulled?
One other item I'd like to point out a correction to. That's item G, the ordinance. The ordinance went on the last page, on page 2 of the ordinance, and it lists all of the zip codes, area codes, zip codes, sorry. And then in parentheses, it lists the cities, and it missed Los Olivos.
So just to be clear, this is on section 2-4-2 membership subdivision B with a qualification. There are 5 zip codes listed there, and I apologize, I was not here for the last meeting, so that change was made at the last meeting. Is the concern that it says Los Alamos and it should say Los Olivos, or that it should also say Los Olivos?
And I believe it should also say Los
Okay,
Olivos.
that's a non-substantive change. We can go ahead and make that without having to
It's
restate
a
it.
typo, basically. but it's-
Absolutely, yeah.
But I wanted to make that point because that was an omission, I thought.
Thank you. We'll make a note of that, and that'll be on the final version that the mayor signs.
I've been getting a lot of feedback and hearing a lot of the residents that on that same item 4G for the TAC, that we're giving some parameters for the people to, for specific job titles. And a lot of the comments that I'm hearing are, can we have actually a couple of people that are just residents? And maybe one on the north side, and,
That's
just
what we
to
said.
throw it out there.
I've got comments the same thing.
Yeah,
I was
just-
gonna,
And so
as was I.
That's, but it was in the paper, that it's like, can we just have like a regular Joe or Jane
Yeah.
that,
So I'm wondering if maybe we just have a consensus of it, is maybe we do 5 that are part of this, and then maybe the other 2 remaining could actually just be residents only.
Well, we have the business group, and then we have the residents, and obviously, somebody owns a business, it really doesn't matter where they live from the standpoint of the interest in their business. But for the residents, it just doesn't make sense to me, and I've heard a lot about it, that we would have somebody from Los Alamos or even Los Olivos making decisions with all the people that we have in this city, that should be on this committee. So I would hope, and that's all I can say, and hope and ask that if we select people, 2 people, that they be Solvang city residents.
or own
Own a business
Solvang.
in Solvang.
Well, the idea is to represent as many industries as possible that would benefit or should influence what our marketing decisions are, but that's not to say that residents have to be from those industries to be in the committee. Certainly anybody that feels that they can contribute is welcome to apply. And of course, we value resident input, and we value everybody coming up to here and expressing their concerns.
Well, that's the other part of this. This is a Brown Act committee. Anybody from the city, they'll be announced. Anybody from the city can come, as they do here, and make comments to that TAC. So a resident isn't gonna typically have the experience with the visitors, with the knowledge, like a hotel owner or a store owner who talks to people all the time and have that kind of input that could go into the TAC.
But it affects him as much as
It
anybody
does.
else in town. So that's
Right.
why I was saying we would
Yeah.
add that person.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you're just focusing on bringing more bodies into town.
Right.
And
Fair point.
how that impacts somebody who lives in Skip Mesa or over
Well,
on Viborg.
and-
It definitely affects those people. That's the only reason I brought it up.
Right, and just to bring it right back down is traffic. Bodies and traffic.
Yep.
And it impacts our residents every bit as much as it does the businesses, so I just, maybe just putting it out there for all of the residents that are listening or wanna listen later, that will be a consideration for us as we're making those decisions. So I don't know if that's something that did need to get changed specifically on there, or
I don't think it needs to have a change, because if you take a look at that subdivision B, there are two sentences in there. The second one's the important one. The TAC member shall be a legal resident of these zip codes. That's the standard that you have.
Right.
Then the preceding sentence says the committee shall represent a cross-section of the community as it relates to tourism as much as possible. So you may make a determination, because there are more categories there than there are seats on there. You may make a determination that it's important to have, for example, I'm just pointing it out, 4 business members and 3 residents whose input is just as a resident. Or you may decide 5 and 2, 6 and 1, what have you. You have that option, because the only standard that has to be met is that they be a resident of one of those zip codes.
And be in a district.
All right. I had a question on the 4G, I think it's 4G. Oh, no, I'm sorry, 4E, regarding the project that is substantially completed. And I'm just wondering, usually when you're paying for a project, you're waiting for the project to be completed, not substantially completed. And so I just was kind of curious is there a percentage that we're willing to pay for the project prior to it being fully completed, as opposed to substantially completed?
Sure, is this on? Okay, great. Good evening, Mayor Yerga, council members, Matt Vanderlinden, your Public Works Director and Utilities Director. That's a good question. So in this particular case, well, first of all, on every Public Works project, we retain 5%. So every invoice that comes in, we only pay 95% of the invoice amount, and we hold 5% to the end, and make sure all the material suppliers and all the subcontractors have been paid before we release that final retention money to the contractor. But in this case, there are benches coming. The project is substantially complete, but there was a delay in receiving the benches. And there's gonna be a bench that gets installed there, and then at that point, we'll take down the cones and everything and move the bus stop sign, and it'll be opened. But yeah, we only pay based on the true percentage complete. So if we get an invoice, and the contractor's billing like 90% complete on a project, but we go out there and we inspect and it's only 75% complete, we're gonna reject that invoice. We're gonna kick it back to the contractor and say, revise your invoice to reflect the actual true percentage complete. So normally on a contract, we have multiple bid items, and some of those get paid as like a lump sum. Some of them get paid based on quantities. And so we check those quantities, we check if it's a lump sum item, and for example, if they're halfway done with that, then we can pay 50% of it. If they're, so we're always very, very careful. Yeah, the worst thing you could possibly do is pay in full when it's not done. So the notice of completion that you're looking at this evening in the agenda packet, basically we're saying that the project is substantially complete. And when we issue this notice of completion, that gives all the material suppliers and vendors, it starts the clock, and they have 30 days to file with us any
Leads.
any notice of that they haven't been paid or whatever.
Okay.
And then we follow up with the contractor. So in this case, I think the contractor has only sent us one invoice, and that was for the month of June. So all the work that they completed in July, we haven't even been invoiced yet. So we still are holding at least, I think, about 50% of the project funds still, so.
Okay, thank you for that explanation, Matt, I appreciate it. The last was on 4F, which is the waiver. I received word from Pastor Chris that he would just like to remove that item that's been taken care of, so.
Can be removed,
Okay,
withdrawn.
so we won't be needing to vote on item 4F. Can I have a motion to accept the agenda with the changes as noted?
Sure, I'll move we accept the agenda with the changes as noted.
Second.
Councilmember
Roll
Clark,
call, please.
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yurick.
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
All right, moving on to now item number 6. Madam Clerk, would you please read the title?
Item number 6 is resolution adopting user and regulatory fees. The recommendation is that the City Council receive the report and approve the resolution updating the city's fees for the general fund as recommended and presented in the report. I will do a brief introduction, and then we have consultants who were hired earlier in the year to work with the city to do this general fund fees update. In short summary, the city hasn't updated its cost allocation or the general fund fees in its majority since 2005. Obviously, you can tell that the cost of services changes rather dramatically. In fact, the building fees were not ever updated from what was incorporated in 1985. That results in significant losses year over year. The proposal is sensitive to, we looked through the areas where we think that it's reasonable to ask for 100% cost recovery, while there's other recommendations where we looked at the relative percent increase and kind of starting the process of stair-stepping the increases over time. And then there's other areas such as recreation, for example, where we are proposing that the increases in fees would be basically a subsidy to ensure that the city is continuing to provide those services to the community and there isn't a huge jump. Overall, the fee increase as adopted would result in almost $300,000 additional revenue to the city. And we have our consultants here with us. They are on Zoom, given our new COVID regulations and travel being a little bit relying on our Zoom once again. So we have Terry, who will kick off the presentation and walk us through the slides.
Good evening, Mayor, members of City Council. Thank you for allowing me to participate in this topic. City Clerk, would you like me to share my screen for the presentation?
You can go ahead and share your screen, yes.
So, members of the council, are you able to see the presentation on your screens?
Yes, thank you.
Very good. Well, as the city manager mentioned, my name is Terry Madsen. I'm here with my colleague David Schroeder. We're from ClearSource Financial Consulting, and our firm helps communities throughout the state identify and recover the cost of providing fee-related services. Communities collect fees as a mechanism when they are providing a direct service or providing a direct benefit to recipients. We use tax revenues to fund what are commonly considered community-wide programming. So we typically use taxes for public safety services, public works services, parks maintenance services, and frequently use fees for things like plan review, permitting, field inspection, this kind of thing, where we can assign a specific receiver of service rather than a community-wide receiver of service. So just to clarify some examples of what we think about, commonly called current planning fees, things like entitlement review, review of applications to ensure compliance with zoning code. If somebody wants to discreetly use the city right of way and requires an encroachment permit, or building permit fees, if I wanna remodel my kitchen, if I wanna do some new construction, an addition of square footage. These are things that are typically the cost of these services, the cost of city staff time, or your consultant support are recovered via user and regulatory fees. It's very important to note that our study does not examine taxes or assessments or utility rates. These are things that affect all of Solvang. The stuff we're examining typically affects only a small portion of your population. It's those that are wanting to do something different, right? We want to add on, we want to remodel, we want to build something new. So why do cities charge fees, and why do they proactively manage this revenue source? Well, one of the things that we want to make sure is that the reason we periodically examine fees is there is state and federal guidance regarding how we want to collect fees. We don't want to exceed our cost of service. If we exceed our cost of service, then we are a tax. So we want to be able to consistently show that what we're charging in fee-related services does not exceed the city's cost. We talked briefly in the earlier slide about that idea of finding a direct, discrete source of funding for things that are providing direct, discrete benefit. This offers relief to the general fund. So as city council members, you have all these policy considerations, you have fiscal considerations. One of the things you deal with fiscally is limited resource to spread amongst competing priorities. So as we recover more of our cost of providing fee-related services, by definition, you're freeing up some general fund dollar to be used towards something other than subsidizing the cost of these fee services. Final important note that we like to point out here is this idea of helping to enable this continuity of service level expectations. So if I'm a member of Solvang, if I'm a resident of Solvang, I'm a business in Solvang, I have this expectation that I'll be able to come to the counter and receive a service level. That if I submit plans, they'll be checked, this kind of stuff. Covering our costs of providing these services helps us continue to effectively provide those same services. Because these are fees, they are set at the direction of the city council. So there are rules about how we adopt and update certain types of fees. We can hold a public hearing prior to adopting any new fees, and we do these testings to make sure that what we're adopting is really a fee and not a tax. And so we want to make sure that we allocate costs in proportion to service received. So if something's less complex, it would have a lower cost assigned to it than something that's more complex. That is just a cost issue. And then when establishing fees, we just want to make sure that we don't establish fees that exceed our cost of providing service. So over and over in the report you received and in this presentation, we reference this concept of cost of service and a secondary concept of cost recovery. I'd like to focus on those two concepts briefly, and then we'll talk about some outcomes specific to Solvang. So first, this concept of cost of service. These are service-based fees that we're examining. So the primary driver is what we would think about as some form of labor, either your own in-house staff or contractual support that you receive, but it's really, it's labor power that's the driver of cost. But a lot of times we can think of an employee and say, oh, I'm an employee of the city and I make a base wage rate of $35 or $40 an hour, something like that. But the reality is that might be my base wage rate, but then there's benefits, there's services and supplies, there's human resources support, finance support, city clerk support. There's all types of, support that I receive that allows me to provide service to the community. There's also this concept of, I'm paid for 2,080 hours a year, but I'm not at City Hall 2,080 hours a year because of, leave, sick leave, vacation, holidays, maybe training time, all of these different scenarios. So we built what is called a fully burdened hourly rate that considers all of those various scenarios. The other driver of cost is time. So if I know, let's say my hourly rate is $150 an hour and something takes me an hour to perform, the cost of that service is $150. If a different service takes me 2 hours to perform, the cost of that service is $300. So time matters. So once we know our hourly cost of service and typical labor times, we can identify cost of service. The cost of service represents the city's legal ceiling. That's your maximum fee amount. Once we know this cost of service, then we can think about cost recovery. So in that example where we said, let's say something takes the city, it costs the city $300 to provide us service. I'm gonna go out and do a field inspection of some construction improvement. And that cost to the city of Solvang of sending out that labor for a couple times is $300. If the city of Solvang only collects a fee of $100, the cost to the city has still been $300. It just recovered $100 of that cost from the fee applicant, and $200 of that cost was paid from some other city resource, which in the vast majority of cases would be the general fund. So that's a decision the council has to make. Sometimes we illustrate it when we try and put it in practical terms. We would say something like, if I'm a Solvang resident and I'm doing a kitchen remodel, and let's say the cost of service to the city is $1,500, but the fee was only $750, we would say that there was partial cost recovery. $750 of that cost was paid by me, the applicant, but the remainder was paid by the other residents and businesses of Solvang via general tax dollars. So it was subsidized. So that's the information we're trying to provide the council as part of this analysis to help you make decisions. So now those are concepts that apply generally to communities throughout the state of California. And now here are findings that are particular to Solvang. So what we see is it depends on the fee category. Remember, we have these broad categories of fees. We have building fees, current planning fees, engineering fees. We also have parking facility rentals, and we have some administrative fees associated with providing licensing services like business licensing. Depending on the category of service, there's different cost recovery levels. And then remember that within building, there are hundreds of individual fee categories, so the cost recovery may vary by fee category. What we're showing you here is aggregate, sort of divisionally by broad fee category, building fees as a whole. And so we see under recovery, the city manager mentioned it has been many years since these fees were comprehensively updated. And even, I think your existing building fee schedule was taken in a mirror of a county fee schedule. So we're trying to develop something that reflects Solvang now. But we have under recovery, there are places where we feel like we can significantly enhance cost recovery, and there are areas where we will continue to be challenged. So where we feel like we can significantly enhance cost recoveries on the building side, communities throughout the state are really targeting full cost recovery. The agencies that we're working with, we see this push towards full cost recovery. As long as you feel comfortable that you're in line with the region and that we can show that your costs are not unreasonable. So we feel like we've met those parameters to help you make decisions. And so unless the council directs otherwise, the proposed fee schedule targets enhanced cost recovery, in all areas, but it says that there's a challenge here where in the parks, fields, and facilities, we have significant costs of maintaining our parks, maintaining our facilities, and if we wanted to move to what we would call full cost recovery there, we think we would take you to a real regional outlier, and staff is worried that you may have no demand and really haven't met a secondary, maybe even a primary goal of having, you know, usage by your community of these facilities. So we do think that you can modify your fee schedule and enhance cost recovery to the tune of close to 300,000 new general fund dollars. What's important to note here is that these would be dollars that offset existing costs. So it's not assuming new programming, it's saying these costs exist today, and we're just trying to offset a greater portion of those costs. So generally, there is room for enhancement, and if we do modify fees, the ripple effect of that is freeing up general fund dollars to be used for some other purpose. So as city council members, frequently when you're asked to make decisions about hundreds and hundreds of fees, which is common throughout the state, so you have hundreds of unique individual fees because you're trying to contemplate the various scenarios that may walk in the door in any given year, or maybe not even in any year. Maybe you might see it once every few years, but you're trying to think of the scenarios that are potential, and so you have hundreds of different scenarios because you have very minor requests and more significant requests. But to help you make decisions, you say to yourself, is there any sort of precedent out there? If I adopted updated fees, would I be turning myself into some regional outlier, or am I in line with what other communities are doing? This is a useful tool. We want to point out that there are some drawbacks to the approach, and we'll highlight some of the benefits. The drawbacks may be that you're comparing yourself. Frequently you say, I would like to compare myself to neighboring communities. Neighboring communities that have similar look and feel to me, maybe. The drawback is maybe your neighbors haven't examined their fees for several years, or they have examined their fees, but they still target less than full cost recovery, or they may just have different service levels than you. So you can compare a fee with a very similar name. The fee is called Design Review. But Design Review in Solvang may encompass A and B and C. And Design Review at one neighbor may only be A and B. And at another neighbor it may be A, B, C, and D. And that's just organizationally how they choose to provide design reviews. So it's hard to gauge how are we looking at apples to apples. The benefits, though, are really quickly you can say, is there some historical precedent for what I'm trying to do? And even knowing all those potential drawbacks, what do I look like amongst the region? So there are definitely benefits to the approach. A challenge that we face is that you have hundreds of uniquely identified fees. So does a neighbor, and so does a different neighbor and a different neighbor. And they may have different naming conventions, and so really you could have thousands of scenarios to examine, and it's unrealistic to compare all of those scenarios. So what we have to do is try and figure out, can we find some high volume scenarios that sort of give us an idea of where we're heading? And what we will say as a consultant who's worked with lots of agencies in California is, depending on the fee we pick, you will, because you have hundreds of fees, and these other agencies have hundreds of fees, you could pick one out of the 100 where you will end up at the low end, another one where you would end up at the middle, and another one where you will end up at the high end. It depends on the fee. But what we're trying to figure out is there some general pattern to help us make decisions? And what we find is, on that building side of the shop, which is where your majority of your permit volume is building permits, there is this pattern where Solvang is currently at the low end of the fee spectrum. So we'll show you several slides, and those slides are going to show a similar pattern. If we modify fees to our costs today, we would take you to that upper mid range of that fee spectrum. We pay particular attention to Buellton and to Santa Barbara County. Buellton is actually served by Santa Barbara County, so their fees are the same. And so you'll see over and over their pattern is just a match. Whatever Buellton charges, Santa Barbara County charges because Santa Barbara County is providing the service. But we paid attention to them as your nearest neighbor. So we are in line with what they are charging you, or a little lower than them depending on the fee category. So this is a residential HVAC change out. Here's a service panel change out, which is a common request. Water heater change out. These are higher volume type permits, and you want to make sure this is an existing resident that would request this type of permit, not a new builder. So we want to make sure that you have information that would affect your existing residents. Temporary power pole, this might happen with a new builder. The reason we use it as a comparison is it appears from fee schedule to fee schedule to fee schedule, so you can find it on all these agencies' fee schedule. But again, Solvang is at the low end, and what we're doing is moving you into that mid-range. Building permit and plan review now for a more significant project. Those are minor permits, maybe a $35,000 remodel. What would that building permit and plan review fee be? Again, you are at the lower end of the spectrum. You would move yourself into that mid-range. Now you're getting into something bigger. $100,000 remodels might be kitchen and bathroom, something like that. And just moving yourself more into alignment with what it actually costs to provide the service in Solvang. What you can see here though is even if we modified this to the building permit and plan review fee is less than 5% of that base project remodel cost. That is probably, from a valuation perspective, even less than what the applicant is paying their contractor. Here's some non-building permit fees that are typically paid particular attention to by city councils. So one of the things we said, a lot of councils really push towards that full cost recovery on these development related fees. One of the areas where we still see some differentiation between councils is this idea of appeals processing. There are a few councils that really target higher cost recovery levels, but a lot of the councils we work with still target lower cost recovery levels here, with the idea that even though I may only see a couple of these a year, if that, I want to make it. I don't want cost prohibition to be a reason somebody doesn't appeal a project. So these are expensive items to deal with because staff has to prepare for them. You have attorney support, but a lot of times we see some form of city subsidy, and you can see that's clear here. Santa Barbara County, Goleta, Buellton, we don't know their exact cost, but based on every agency we've ever worked with, we feel comfortable their cost is significantly higher than what's shown here. That's an editorial comment, but if you ask staff, how long would it take you to prepare to support an appeal for the council? They might say 8 hours, 20 hours, 24 hours, whatever. It's more than $500. So we moved your fee up, but we're still targeting less than full cost recovery. Another item that can sort of appear from fee schedule to fee schedule, so it's useful for comparison purposes, is this idea of a conditional use permit. So somebody requesting to use a business or use property and requiring some conditions of use, some blessing by the city of Solvang. You are at the lower end of the spectrum today, and we'd be moving you to the middle end. Sign permit fees, again, you're at the lower end, but we're still we're not taking you super high. We're not taking you to the high end of the spectrum, but there is a recalibration here. We mentioned that for parks and facility rentals, there's low cost recovery. What we see for veterans building is about 35%. For Hans Christian Andersen and Sunnyfields, it's about 8%. There's a lot of regional influence here. When we were talking with staff, there is demand for these facilities. What we tentatively proposed was a 20% rate increase, and that would take your cost recovery to 42% for veterans building and around 10% for Hans Christian Andersen Park and Sunnyfield. The idea here is that although, really it's competing priorities, right? You have to figure out how much, what is the demand. So the idea here is, yes, we would love to enhance cost recovery as something beyond 10%, but we thought, what if the city started at this initial adjustment, and then staff can monitor rental volume going forward, applicant feedback, these kind of things, and determine whether a subsequent year adjustment was possible, just to see how does demand continue to look. This adjustment would keep you in line with Buellton and the county for their similar type rentals. If we move too much farther than this, I think at some point you'd become a regional outlier. So the recommendations are really this idea of proactive fee management being just something that the city embraces. The reasons are this idea of increasing general fund revenues for services and activities that benefit all Sullivan residents and businesses, such as public safety services, rather than using those for really discrete services. If you proactively manage and adjust these fees, it helps keep pace with this regional cost inflation. So most of our communities are moving towards this idea of periodically, I will do these full cost of service studies, but in the interim years, I'll do some sort of cost of living type adjustment because just to track inflationary pressures. When we do that, we can help avoid fee spikes that are more likely to occur when you go a decade between updates. Also, that ongoing fee adjustment and recalibration helps provide the city council, finance, city manager with information to forecast and to help with decisions. Adjusting fees and identifying revenues to offset costs helps meet those service level expectations. And then really this final idea of that encouragement of generational equity between fee payers. So if for 10 years we did something for $100 and tomorrow somebody pays $5,000 for it, the $100 applicants really, there was some inequity there. And so the idea of just trying to figure out how can we continue to have people pay for the services they're receiving at some general level. So before adopting fees, we said that these are adopted at the direction of City Council. A public hearing would be open to receive any feedback from interested members of the community, and then the council would take a vote to decide whether to adopt the updated schedule of fees. If you do adopt fees for items that are development related, the California Government Code outlines that any sort of new fees or increased fees, there's a 60-day waiting period before what the fees you adopt go into effect. This concludes my presentation. I thank you for your time and attention, and I'm available to receive any questions or feedback from council. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Are there any questions of the staff report?
No questions.
Any comments?
Well, I do have a question. There is a difference between minor versus major event. What determines what's a minor versus a major event?
I can defer to staff, but I think the decider is a minor event would be processed just in-house, and a major event is something that your contracted special event / marketing firm would support and lead.
Correct. The minor event would be just something that doesn't require major street closures, processing it. It's just a sort of a blank event application. So for example, music in the park is a minor event. It's very small. We just look at the insurance requirements and reasonableness of what they will serve and the hours that they're asking for, versus a major event would be shooting, for example, a large commercial that includes multiple street closures, impacts business. Then we want to recover a lot more cost from that applicant.
Go ahead.
Yeah, looking at the list of fees, you've selected all of the existing fees and then suggested a proposed fee that would give you a cost recovery, and then you list the percentage, whatever that might be. What I haven't seen is anything that suggests that some of these fees are not needed, or are there other fees that are needed that aren't on this list?
So there are adjustments to your fee schedule. Your fee schedule is not an exact, your adjusted fee schedule would not be an exact match with just new dollar figures. Staff has gone through and said, I recommend re-tiering encroachment permit fees, the way we deal with encroachment permit fees. And planning staff and the consultant support helped us eliminate some sort of categories that were not needed in Solvang. And we renamed other categories, so there has been cleanup beyond just identifying new numbers. We looked at the schedule and says, does the schedule accommodate the services that you're providing?
As part of the public review of this, do you expect, or have you commonly seen suggestions for adding or deleting fees?
So I'm not sure if I'm answering you correctly, but this is an opportunity. If a stakeholder said, the public hearing provides an opportunity for anyone to comment on whether they have questions about the cost of service, whether they believe a fee should be deleted, whether they should believe new fees should be added. So there is opportunity for that as part of this study. We also worked with staff and asked those same questions. So, like I said, it is not an exact match. We tried to create a structure that reflects your organization today.
Thank you.
A question for the city manager. What is the process going forward on this?
So if you adopt this resolution today, the fee schedule that's here in the agenda will become effective in 60 days. So in 60 days, we'll have all of our systems updated and we'll start charging these new fees.
So we're being asked to adopt all these increases without any input from the community.
This is the opportunity for input. You could.
This meeting?
You could continue for one more meeting. Typically, these take only 1 or 2 meetings, unless it's a more controversial set of fees.
Well,
So,
yeah, I don't know how anybody else feels, but I'm not comfortable to go forward with this without input from the community on it, especially some of these like the Vets Hall. I think frankly, they've already paid their dues as far as I'm concerned, but that's a different issue.
The Vets Hall, it's not the Vets. The Vets Hall is the renters for the Veterans Hall.
It's for a birthday party.
Okay.
They're renting it out for a birthday party. That's what the fee would go up
Okay.
for. But yeah, the public needs to be more involved. Maybe that's our fault. We didn't advertise this well enough that this is the time to come in and make comment, because we do need to let people come in. I don't want to broadside anybody with this
Exactly.
with this tonight.
But have you read every one of these fees? Have you looked at
I've looked
this?
through a lot of them.
That's an intensive list.
I focus on the building stuff, but yeah.
Yeah, well, that would make sense for considering your business, but I've looked at a lot of this stuff and I don't understand. It looks like there's a couple things that are left out. I mean, this is not something I'm willing to say yes to tonight, period.
Seeing a consensus.
One of your options is to provide with policy direction today and then to continue this item to the next agenda and consider it.
At very least.
I have a question to city staff. How often do people come in and pay for permits to change out water heaters? Is it common?
Yeah, it's common enough, yes.
Good for them.
I mean, that's the process that we should be following, so yes,
Yeah.
there's people that come in and pay for that. Just once again, to remind you, the general fee studies here for the city of Solvang haven't been done since about 2005. So typically you want to do a fee study like this at least every 5 years and maybe have some kind of CPI increase throughout the intermediary years. So it's been quite a while. There's quite a bit of money. As you can see, if you applied these changes, we would be recovering close to $300,000 a year in general fund, which is substantial compared, and it's money that's being lost. This is something that all jurisdictions do. It's cost recovery. That's how those costs are typically recovered. It's definitely reasonable to continue this for another meeting. Typically, these don't take more than 2 meetings for other jurisdictions.
Say that again, what about more than 2 meetings?
Typically, you don't have more than 2
Typically,
hearings.
but there's no requirement. We can extend this as much as we want.
Of course, you can.
Thank you, okay.
And if I could add, I'm in favor of this because I want to be in line with other cities our size. I like recouping money. I don't like regular taxpayers paying for somebody else, subsidizing somebody else's project, but I agree with this, and it doesn't take us to the top, it keeps us right in the middle, and we're similar to other cities. I'm okay with it. When you add it all up and it's only $300 and some odd $1,000, you think only, but that's $300,000. So it's not like you're really hammering any one segment to make this up. You're just trying to get more in line with other cities that are similar to Solvang, or even, I'm sorry, not similar, but in our county. When I don't want to go to Santa Barbara numbers, but I think that we do need to raise these numbers, and so I'm actually okay with it. I just wish we had public input tonight. So that's where I'm at. I'm happy with this. I think we need to do it, but I still want to give the public opportunity to talk about it.
Yeah, I'd recommend that we push it to the next meeting.
Okay.
I concur that we need to do it, no
Yeah.
question in my mind.
Because you just, yeah.
But it's just a bit much to consume, and we've got no public input coming in on it at all. I mean, just take a look at some fees. Here's fees for electric trolleys and peddlers licenses, but nothing for the mokes. We don't have anything for cars?
Those are gonna be regulated by the state. That's
Those-
not something we've got the control over because they're not subject to a franchise agreement with the city. They're not subject to a license agreement. They're just licensed by the DMV.
Okay, see, that's the information that I don't have, sorry, my ignorance maybe. But that's why I'm kind of curious why we don't see some things, or we do see some things that I'm not sure we need.
I would, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt. I'd like to ask on for instance, at least on page 91, where it's talking about the schedule of user and regulatory fees, miscellaneous fees. So there's a number of miscellaneous fees that all we're saying is actual costs. And it seems to me that if we have someone wanting to do a half marathon here, and he wants to know, hey, how much is it gonna cost? We're gonna go, well, we don't know, but whatever it costs, that's what you're gonna get charged. And I really think it's a disservice to the people that are trying to put on an event. Same thing with a film permit. We should have some number there to at least start. And then from there, I think we can go up with it a little bit if we need to. But to just arbitrarily put actual costs, maybe down the road, we're gonna actually put an actual cost. So that was one comment. And then the other one is there's a number of places where it's time and materials plus 15% or time and materials plus 20%. Is that only because, why is there not the same percentage? Is it because the staff that is used costs more per hour, and that's how it ends up being 15% on one as opposed to 20% on some other cost? And
Yeah, water meter installations.
those were a couple of comments, and then the other one was, I'm seeing it on page 85, the roofing square foot calculation. There's a small parent A and a parent B to the right side of that whole calculation, but it doesn't indicate what parent B is there. It does indicate what parent C is on all the items below it. So I didn't know what that was unless, I'm looking at the first part of this and I know that there's a number of pages that duplicate, and I know later on it talked about parent B being that if it was a 12,000, and gave an example of a 12,000 square foot roof, they're gonna get charged for a 20,000 square foot roof. So then that was the other point that I wanted to bring up, is that just doesn't quite seem fair that we're, maybe it's just me, but you know, if I've got a 11,000 or a 10,075 square foot roof, I'm gonna get charged for a 20,000 square foot roof in my fees. Now, it is only $328, but it's still, maybe it could be prorated based on whatever it is, based on a 10,000 square foot. Just a thought. And then on page 93, excuse me, still fighting a bit of a cold. It doesn't indicate any fees for Solvang Park, and that is one of our bigger ones where we can actually have events there. So it only indicates HCA Park and Sunny Fields Park, but we also have Solvang Park, and there's no fees generated for that in any of the cost estimates that I see. So does that mean that all these people that are wanting to use that, it seemed that if we don't have some type of cost attached to Solvang Park, that everybody's gonna wanna go to Solvang Park because they don't have to pay for it, or would be very little compared to what it is for some of the other spots. And that is actually our only park that we can have amplified music. So a lot of our larger events are able, that's the only place they can go. So I would think that an organizer that would be wanting to do an event there, whatever it would end up being, would need to have some type of fee attached to that. So I just wanted to bring that up, that there wasn't anything for Solvang Park specifically. And only just something super minute, in page 93, Parks Area D for HCA Park, it doesn't indicate that that includes the kitchen. And that park rental part in that area does include the kitchen. Some of the other park areas there, A, B, and C, don't include anything other than that area, but Park Area D actually includes the kitchen. And I noticed that we made that mention for Sunny Fields, that one of those areas does include the the snack bar, yeah, the snack bar. But just a little note on that. I think those were the comments that I had.
I would imagine that things going on at Solvang Park, you're not renting the park, you're permitting an event, which is why I ask, what's the difference between a minor event versus a major event? Because maybe if you're just, hooking up a band to the gazebo and having people over there, then yeah, it only takes minor staff time. But if it involves food vendors, and I see that there's a schedule for power generators and things like that. Is that where those fees come up?
So I think you're correct, Mayor Vitorano, that the reason that Solvang Park is not in the section with other parks is because it's not part of the parks reservation. It is reserved for just a special events permit. As far as your question for a generator?
Yeah, there's in the fee schedule, there's a section that talks about generators and electric rides and things like that. So I would imagine larger events would refer to that fee schedule, so that there could be a guideline of how much this is going to cost to permit.
City manager, may I chime in too?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the mayor mentioned this concept of actual costs, and then I think it's the Mayor Pro Tem is referencing the idea of generators and things like that. So we can make that a little clearer in the fee schedule where we reference the actual cost linked to those events. The primary driver of referencing that was, remember, they're gonna connect with the city's consulting group that is specifically trained and monitors and provides input on what a marathon could expect to pay if it wants to come through Solvang. And the idea behind actual costs is we may not know how much personnel is required to service them because we don't know how many days it is. We don't know how many traffic lanes are closing and those kind of things. So, but we can either ask the consulting group for a copy of their current rate schedule and apply it for informational purposes as sort of an appendix to the rate schedule, or reference people more clearly over to these other rates. And you are right, when we say actual costs, the idea there is if there are certain permits required for certain types of events, maybe an event has flammables or electricity associated with it, needs generator review, generator permitting, the concept of actual cost says you will pay for any sort of applicable permit fees, which may absolutely be generator inspection.
Thank you for that clarification. I forgot one last thing, was the fee that the city is proposing for a temporary electric pole. How are we charging a fee that basically PG&E would be coming out to do? Because we don't have an electric or electrical division or department. That may just be one that we wouldn't be requiring.
I don't think it's I think it's associated with like construction of a home, where they just need a temporary service, and maybe it's not used in Solvang. I'm not sure if it's used in Solvang. We may not actually issue any of these permits, but that is a fee that is referenced in almost all municipal fee schedules. So my belief is that most of those municipalities are using PG&E or Southern California Edison or some utility. There are some municipalities that are own utility, but I think there is some construction where you use some field inspection that is associated with providing that temporary service that your contract service support would inspect.
Okay.
Yeah, it's basically the same as if an electrician installs an electrical panel. We're not providing the electrical panel, but as the code authority, we inspect it to make sure that it complies with code. Same with a temporary power pole. PG&E may be putting it in, but we need to make sure that it's compliant with the electrical code.
Okay.
And that's what that fee would be used for.
Okay. More of a, okay. Got it.
I have just one question, so I understand the process on this. On page 188, for example, the appeal to the DRC, cost of service is $31.54. Is that based on staff time? Is that where you come up with that number?
What page were you on?
On page 188 of our, I'm sorry, page 188 of our agenda. I don't know if.
Let me go to your agenda.
Yeah, that's the problem with having page numbers.
Appeal to DRC.
Yeah, Design Review Committee,
It's under the City of Solvang miscellaneous administration fees.
Yep, that service time, that is linked to in-house city service time. It doesn't consider any sort of attorney support costs you might incur. It's just labor time. And the cost that we identified was an estimated cost. It will vary by appeal, but an estimated cost in the neighborhood of $3,000, and the proposed fee was $1,500.
that's a pretty hefty fee for wanting to know if you're signed, if you're appealing your sign, but I
Yeah,
understand we can go over that later. I was just wondering in that specific one how you came to that. Thank you.
And council note on that one, the recommendation is not full cost recovery. It's about half of what the actual costs are to the city. So there is a discount factored into that.
But that's still, as Councilman Thomas put it, that's a big chunk for, because I want a different color on my, down my sign. That's interesting. I also heard the comment about a consulting team who would decide what designs or what's gonna happen. Who's this consulting team? Terry mentioned that.
I believe the only consulting team I have heard Terry mention was our marketing consultant, so IDK.
Correct.
IDK handles all of the
Special events.
special events, more complex applications, and they do come up with recommendations of what closures are needed, how many
Okay.
people to staff, et
I
cetera,
didn't
et
pick
cetera.
up on that. Thank you. But this is kind of the issue with this thing is we don't, this much information is but still not enough to get through all of this, so I'm not willing to sign up on it tonight.
So would you like to, you can continue to provide specific comments, and if you feel that we are ready to bring this back by the next meeting, you can just continue to the next meeting. If there is something else more substantive that you would need before moving forward with that, then you can make that request as the majority council as well.
I think we probably do. I had one last question related, it was on page 105, excuse me. It's under the City of Solvang building fees, building permit fees, illustration of current fees. Under item number 9, inspections made outside of normal business hours, a minimum of a 4-hour charge. Is that typical for a city, 4-hour minimum charge?
Oh, go ahead. That's on the building permit side, and it is not uncommon, because somebody's asking for service outside of our regular hours, and frequently we would think there's maybe a minimum call out. If you're using in-house staff, there might be a minimum call out of 2 hours of overtime, or it's likely that if you're doing inspections after hours for some sort of business so that they can continue to operate during daytime hours, you're providing a service level beyond what's built into your base fees.
So
And,
I get that. I understand that. I appreciate that clarification. What constitutes outside of normal business hours for us? Anything outside of 8 to 5? Because right now our building inspector's here 2 days a week.
No, it's anything outside of 8 to 5 would be reasonable.
Okay. All right. I think that was, I think we have a consensus maybe to bring this back again in 2 weeks, just to kind of further button up a few things.
And let the public know again.
Please.
Yeah, I think a lot of these fees affect business owners or other people that might have been waiting on the right time to work on a project. I think they would appreciate knowing that they have a certain time before fees go up, and if they do go up, why they're going to go up, why they're going to go up. So yeah, I would like us to work on making sure that everybody knows, hey, our fees are getting revised. Things cost a lot more than they did back in 2005. A lot of these, I don't think they're unreasonable, but they I'm sure they would appreciate knowing that they should act sooner rather than later.
We also could consider not implementing it within that 60 days, just implement it January 1, starting next year.
Feedback we get.
Yeah.
And may I make just a couple more comments in case it helps the council? Just, again, these are editorial comments, but as you it's a very challenging task you have because there are hundreds of items, right? And so you think to yourself, I'm being asked to consider hundreds of items. What we like to tell councils is especially when it's been many years since you've last updated and you're doing a really robust update, the idea, I think it's an unreasonable expectation to believe you will end up with a perfect fee schedule. But the fee schedule is intended to be a dynamic document. It's not intended to live for 15 years without change. So what we try and tell our staff that we work with is, you are gonna give your best effort to come up with a perfect set of fees. And then 3 months from now, somebody's gonna walk in the door with a scenario you did not contemplate. And the fee schedule just doesn't work great for that scenario. The fee schedule that's proposed before you offers always an hourly billing methodology. If something just doesn't play out, there's an hourly billing methodology, because the idea here is not profit. The idea is cost recovery. And so if somebody walks in the door, let's say we recalibrated a fee to $2,000. Let's just say the number was $2,000. But someone walks in the door and we know they're gonna get $100 worth of service, and we just didn't think about that unique scenario when we were trying to adjust 500 fees. You are not obligated to charge them $2,000. There is a caveat that says you can bill hourly. And then what the belief would be is that we would come back to City Council and say, we got 96% of these fees the way we wanted them to go. But there's 3 recalibrations we want to make. We need to make a new subcategory because this person that walked in the door 6 months ago. So we're gonna do a whole bunch of CPI adjustments, and we're gonna do 3 moves that are non-CPI. But what you've done is taking yourself, you're continuing to progress, you're continuing to move forward. So our cities that dynamically manage their fee schedules, they do these comprehensive updates like you're going through, but then it seems every year they do a few non-CPI type adjustments. We added a new fee category. We need to actually reduce a fee from what we had built into the fee schedule, because as we're doing it in practice, we realize what we had estimated is beyond what it actually is working out to in practice. So I think you have some flexibility, and so I think that can give comfort. There was that concept of appeals and feeling like, hey, that's a lot to ask. And again, that is a decision that absolutely, that's something to consider, and you can tell that communities do frequently subsidize that. We are still proposing a subsidy. What we hear from staff when they argue towards something more than what they're doing at this particular moment, the idea that we hear from the staff professionals is, number one, we try and give a lot of feedback to our applicants to avoid appeals altogether. So we try and minimize the number of appeals received. Can we figure this out together without going to an appeal process? But if we do need to go to an appeal process, the only reason something is being appealed is there has already been a decision made as to whether this is in line with the city's municipal code. And so staff has made a decision, and now we're asking to go somewhere beyond that. And so there is this idea that there should be some cost recovery associated with that effort, even if it's reduced cost recovery. And reminder, that cost that we're showing, that's the in-house cost, not even any attorney support costs that you're likely to incur. So just food for thought in case it helps you in your decision-making process as you digest until the next round.
Great, thank you very much for that. I was just wondering if we wanted to bring it back at the next council meeting or 4 weeks from today, only because of all of the stuff that's set up, including the joint meeting.
Yeah, that's a good point for the joint meeting next
For the
time.
23rd, it might be quite a bit Make it a 4-week.
Yeah, I think we really need the input because, with everything that's going on, the pandemic and everything else, it's having an impact on a lot of our businesses, and the people that are gonna be paying these fees are probably not in as good a shape now as they were last year. So we need a little more time, I think.
What I was going to suggest is, because this was noticed as a public hearing, that you continue the public hearing to that date so that we don't have to go through the same public hearing noticing that we did in the newspaper. It'll still be publicly noticed as part of the agenda packet, but we wouldn't be sending another notice to the newspaper.
Okay.
And this was advertised as public
But if
hearing
we
with
could
the
do it for the
newspaper.
first one of September as opposed to the 23rd, I just kind of thinking ahead what we have scheduled for that day. Quite a bit. That's a lot of stuff on there, so.
Okay, so public hearing is continued then to September 13th.
This is, I had to take it out to public comment because we haven't had any public comment on this yet. Do we have any public comment in-house? Or anyone out in Zoom at this point?
We have a couple of
I
members of
see.
the public. There you go.
Jim Richardson. You're up, Mr. Richardson.
I believe it's Richard Lane.
Jim, you need to unmute yourself.
It's a common mistake, people mistake me for my neighbor Jim.
Ah, different Richardson. It's hard to tell when we're looking at the small square.
I think that's my username on the computer, yeah. I'd like to respectfully disagree or just use a different definition of what we've been talking about. We're talking about fees, and the consultant says these are not a tax, the lawyer says it's not a tax, but from common usage standpoint, common use of language, if I pay money, or I'm in a class of people that pay money to this city or to any governmental entity, what's the difference between that and a tax? So when you think of this as an unofficial tax, this is something that you're going to be talking about, and I think you really need to get lots of public input. You need to think about this as a $300,000 tax increase. It only goes to certain people, it's only borne by certain classes of people, but those people should really have that input. And I was gonna say some other things because my interest mainly is as a member of an arts organization that uses the Vets Hall frequently. I will point out that if the fees go up, and we have to watch not just our dollars, but our pennies, we have to look around, what are the alternatives? And we have performed in alternative places before. We're comfortable with the Vets Hall. We do 2 sets of concerts in normal times, and we hope to be able to do that. But you have to be competitive. I would, as an aside, just say, well, maybe the city should really be thinking about ways to subsidize arts institutions. But I think you're doing that because you're very generous for the nonprofits in the particular category by only increasing the fees a small amount. You're not worried about full cost recovery. I do have one question that I'd like to ask, because I didn't see it, and that's maybe because I didn't do all my homework. Anywhere in the different fees of the particular things that we're interested in, I didn't see anything about the banner on Highway 246. Is that in this report?
It is in there.
Okay. I'll dig that in. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And then I can't tell who's next to you.
CJ Jackson.
CJ?
All right, am I unmuted?
You're good now.
I hadn't planned to speak to this, but I have more of a question that perhaps I would suggest that the council at least understand if they go forward and look into it. That's for Mr. Manson. You've illustrated a process whereby you do a comparative of peer cities. You've also done a comparative on the basis of cost delivered, all right? My question is, where in your analysis does Solvang's difference in its delivery of said fees or said costs or said services factor in? I'll use as an example. Years ago, I don't know what the status is now, but I know it's been in flux. If you submitted plans for a house and you had to have those plans reviewed for your building permit, etc. At one point, Solvang used I think it's called California Code Check, where you send it out of town to have it done. Now, therefore, there is a different process, a less hands-on or tangible process relative to that peer city who has an in-house team to do the plan check. And I'm highly sensitized to building permit fees because, and admittedly, some of this is impacted by COVID. The differences in the manner in which Solvang delivers the service that accompanies these fees may not be, on a qualitative basis, comparative with your peers. So I guess my question to you, and it's across the spectrum of all your fees, is do you factor in the differential delivery that Solvang delivers its fees versus the comparatives? Because it would seem to me that you would have citizens that would be concerned about the cost of what they're getting if you're comparing with a city that has its in-house. I think that's the best way to express it.
Terry, you're muted.
Thank you. Thank you for the comments. I do feel comfortable attempting to answer your question. I hope it's a thorough enough answer. You raised sort of two important points. What I will tell you is when we do our analysis, the comparison is the last thing we think about. So the entire analysis is driven with blinders on to the city of Solvang. We think exclusively of the city of Solvang's organization and cost structures, and we build our cost of service analysis based on what it costs to provide service in Solvang. We don't think about Santa Barbara County or Buellton or Ojai or Santa Maria or anybody else. We think about Solvang, and we price out the work in Solvang. And then, once we have that information, we know the city council is like, and we would be fine to stop there. Because that is our legal mandate, is do not collect fees that exceed what it costs you to provide service in Solvang. It doesn't actually care about what some other agency charges. It says, recover your estimated reasonable costs. And so that's what we focus on. But to help the city council with decision making, we provide that secondary comparison analysis, but that drawback slide said, when you look at these comparisons, they may have a different service offering than Solvang does. They may have low fees and give terrible service, or they may have way higher fees than you, but they're staffed by 14 people and you're staffed by 2, right? They have maybe different overhead layers. So that is something we're not scoped to compare. How does this agency over here provide service and build that into the fee comparison? What we do is say, that agency charges this much for a permit. Do with it what you will. It just shows you this sort of order of magnitude, but it does not say they're providing the exact same service as you are.
And if I could just say, that's a critical description if you open up for another public hearing on this. That's really well said, well presented, and that clears up a lot of my concern as I listen to this. So I hope that you would share that very perspective at the outset of a discussion that encourages public participation, because that narrows the focus very effectively, so I congratulate you for that. I'm done. Well done.
Thank you, CJ. Thank you, Terry. Mr. Richardson, just FYI for you, it would be page 187 on the agenda, would be where it's showing the banner fees. Was it Mr. Lane? Oh,
Members of the council, I can do something.
No, move forward.
go ahead.
I have, city councils frequently meet on Monday nights and things like that, depending on the city you work with. I have some September commitments. I mentioned my colleague David Schroeder is on the line. If my September commitments don't change, you're likely to hear from David Schroeder the next time we meet. But I feel like you're familiar with the topic. The answers aren't gonna change. It's just gonna be, what is the city council's preference?
Good.
And we'll provide all the feedback that you requested though.
All right, thank you, Terry. And with that, bring it back for final comments and discussion. That's it. We're just gonna move it out to 4 weeks.
September 13th, continued.
And I missed my 8 o'clock break.
Let's take one.
We're gonna take one for 5 minutes. We'll be right back. It's at 9:25. All right, we're back from our break. It's 9:30. And if I can have a motion to extend the meeting.
I'll make a motion to extend the meeting past 9:30.
Second.
Thank you.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
No.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Urig.
Yes.
Oh.
Okay, 4 yes, 1 no.
It'll be different next time. It'll be my turn next time. All right, moving on to item number 7.
Item number 7 is the Solving River Wells SWRCB petition. Solving also ID 1, number 1, protest dismissal agreement. This item refers to a long-standing issue that our Public Works Director will describe. There is both legal aspects to it, which will not be described today, but there's also operational aspects to this agreement, as the way that potential future wells will be structured will be in a different situation in different locations. So this item is here in front of you today with recommendation of approval for this agreement. And we wanted to make sure that this was public so that the community had an opportunity for public input. With that, our Public Works Director will present.
All right, good evening again, Mayor Yerg and council members. I'll do a brief presentation or a brief run-through of the staff report and be happy to answer any questions at the end there. So in early 1969, the Solvang Municipal Improvement District, or sometimes referred to by the acronym SMID, which is the predecessor of the city of Solvang, in early 1969, SMID applied for a permit to extract river underflow. And on September 12th, 1969, SMID was issued a permit by the State Water Resources Control Board to do exactly that, extract underflow from the San Ynez River. And then sort of fast forwarding 30 years, in 1999, the State Water Resources Control Board did an inspection of the city's records associated with the permit and did some field inspection here in Solvang and determined that the city was putting 1,053 acre-feet per year to beneficial use of river underflow. And then in 2000, the city requested a time extension to prove up a greater amount of beneficial usage and secure a license for an amount greater than the 1,053 acre-feet per year. Then in 2002, the city hired URS engineers to prepare an EIR for its water master plan and river wells project. The final EIR was certified and adopted by the Solvang City Council on February 24th, 2014. So that's a pretty long time, 12 years to complete an EIR for a water master plan and river wells project, but there were a number of things that happened during that time period. Actually, sadly, the consultant, the project manager for the consultant that was working on that, he passed away. And then there were a number of other staff and administrative changes and city council changes and a variety of things. But anyway, finally, as mentioned, in 2014, the EIR was certified and adopted by the Solvang City Council. Then in 2015, the city submitted 2 petitions regarding its river wells permit, again to the State Water Resources Control Board, and it was a petition for time extension and a petition for change. After publicly noticing the city's petitions, the State Water Resources Control Board received protests from the El Sal Ranch, which holds the superior riparian water rights, from the San Ynez Water District ID number 1, from Cal Trout, who was represented by the Environmental Defense Center, and also by the National Marine Fisheries Service. So in an effort to resolve the protests, a couple different city managers now, as well as a few different special water attorneys and a number of people with the public works staff and our consultants completed numerous phone conferences, meetings, studies, calculations, created a number of maps and had extensive meetings and negotiations through over a few-year period. So more recently, the city withdrew its petition for a time extension, and so now and revised the project description. So now we just have one petition, which is for a change in the reach of diversion. And we are requesting a maximum extraction of 1,368 acre-feet per year. And that is the maximum historic extraction that the city has ever made. That was back in 1988. So staff, I'm sorry, and even more recently, staff and our new special water attorney made steady progress and negotiated a final protest dismissal agreement with Alisal Ranch and ID1. The protest dismissal agreement was discussed and approved in concept in closed session on July 26, 2021, so the previous city council meeting, or just prior to the previous city council meeting in closed session. And the purpose of the protest dismissal agreement is to resolve Alisal and ID number 1's respective protests against the city's petition for change, and to provide for the long-term cooperative and coordinated operations of the three parties' existing wells along the river. So key provisions of the agreement are listed in the staff report. There's no direct fiscal impact to approving the protest dismissal agreement with Alisal and ID1 at this time. And staff recommends that the city council approve the three-party protest dismissal agreement between the city of Solvang, Alisal Ranch, and ID1 to resolve Alisal Ranch and ID1's protests to the city's petition for change and regarding coordinated operations of the river wells and restrictions on Solvang river well pumping. And also we recommend that the city council then authorize the mayor to execute the agreement. So that concludes my staff report. I did want to also mention that the ID1 General Manager, Peter Garcia, is here in case you had any questions for them. And I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions of the staff report? No. This time? Yeah.
I would just add, I believe, and Peter can correct me, I believe at their next regular, if this is approved by our city council this evening, that at their next meeting or the meeting in September, they'll be bringing the agreement to their board.
Thought I had something, but now I can't remember. I think it was just the wording, but I'm good. What's that?
I thought we had covered all of this.
Yeah, we did. So. All right, there's no questions up here, so seeing any, we have any comment out in the public at this time?
I bet we do.
We just might. Or out in Zoom? See, none, wow.
Yeah.
All right. Bring it back for final comments or to have a motion.
I'll move we accept this.
I'll second.
Can we have a roll call?
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Yurick.
Yes,
Passes 5-0.
that passes. Thank you for everyone, for the
Thank you.
ID1,
Thank you, Matt.
Mr. Garcia, Matt, CJ, and Chelsea, and Mr. Kim for taking care of business for Solvang. Appreciate it. Now moving on to item number 8.
Item number 8 is cooperative agreement with Caltrans for Alma Pintado Creek Bridge Replacement Project. The recommendation is to approve the cooperative agreement with Caltrans to contribute $1.2 million in solving Measure A funding towards the Caltrans Highway 246 Salama Pintado Creek Bridge Replacement Project and authorize execution of the agreement by the mayor. So this item is on the agenda because it's a fairly significant, it requires your approval, and it's also a fairly significant contribution, even though these funds are specifically marked for this type of projects. And once again, our Public Works Director will provide with a brief report.
Alrighty, so another kind of lengthy path that this took to get where we are today. But at any rate, so from 2005 through 2011, the city of Solvang utilized Indian Gaming Special Distribution Funds to complete the engineering, environmental work, and permitting for the Alamo Pintado Creek Bridge widening project and work through the extensive Caltrans approval process. As a result of various studies, engineering work, and Caltrans requirements, however, the simple bridge widening project basically mushroomed into a major highway improvement project incorporating total bridge replacement, and 2 roundabouts, and the intersection of at the intersection of Highway 246 and Alamo Pintado Road, and also at Alamo Pintado Road and Old Mission Drive. The estimated project cost to replace the bridge and perform this expanded road improvement work was approximately $12 million. In late 2011, Caltrans required the city provide a funding commitment letter and indicated they would not continue to work on this project without assurance from the city of complete project funding. So what I should maybe clarify is the city was spending all this money doing all this engineering, environmental work, and all this, but all of these documents and reports, which were really thick, and all these plans and maps that were created, they all had to be submitted to Caltrans to be reviewed and go through their whole process. And they had these big meetings with multiple different Caltrans staff, the engineering consultants, the city staff, the environmental consultants. So it was very time consuming for them. And so it finally got to that point where they said, hey, we need a funding commitment letter from the city. So the city of Solvang had only $3 million in Measure A Solvang Circulation Improvement funding available. And so on February 13th, 2012, the city council elected to cancel the project due to lack of funding. In 2012, the city council directed staff to seek approval for use of the remaining Indian gaming funds for design of a new project, the Alamo Pintado Creek Bike Ped Bridge project, and proceed with design of that project. So there was a little bit of this Indian gaming funding left. They had canceled the bridge replacement project because of all of the road improvements and everything required. But there had been a development prior to this that had brought forth the concept of a bike ped bridge adjacent to the highway bridge, and that development later got canceled, but that idea was still fresh in people's minds, so the city council said, hey, maybe we can use this remaining funds to at least do the design of this new bicycle pedestrian bridge. But anyway, so when hydraulic analysis was performed, it was determined that the existing bridge was scour critical, the existing highway bridge. And so basically scour critical means that during heavy flows, it's gonna, the velocity of the flows and everything and the force of the flows is gonna be such that it will scour and wash away the bottom of the creek bed more and more over time and expose the abutments and the footings for the columns that are support the middle of the span of the bridge. And eventually that would result in big problems and lead to the need to replace the bridge. So it was determined that the bridge was scour critical. In addition to that, Caltrans had already identified that the concrete used to construct the bridge, the aggregate has a mineral content that makes it reactive with the cement, and over time, instead of getting harder and stronger, it would break down the concrete over time, this reactive aggregate that was used in the concrete. So, and I don't know if any of you were around here in 1997, that was the first big El Nino kind of flooding, and I did not live here. I moved here in '99, but we, heard all about it, and we had in our records all kinds of photographs of that incident, which we provided to Caltrans. So basically, that was the third strike. So the scour critical, reactive aggregate, and the bridge is underneath the 100-year floodplain by about 2 feet. So that's not good when you have a major important highway bridge. So with that, Caltrans determined that the bridge was eligible for replacement under their SHOP program. That's the State Highway Operations and I forget, what is it now, it's an acronym for one of their maintenance programs. But anyway, so in 2016, the City Council directed staff to obtain SBCAG conceptual approval to allocate the Measure A cost-saving funds that had been secured by staff for that project to the Caltrans Bridge project. So as we started to work on that bicycle pedestrian bridge, the second project, SBCAG experienced cost savings on 2 big projects in North Santa Barbara County. And then the city applied for some of that money. So SBCAG made that cost savings available for other projects. We applied, we got $600,000, approved for $600,000. But now that bike ped bridge was gonna be canceled because Caltrans was gonna do the complete replacement themselves, we wanted to be able to use that funding as sort of a local contribution to the Caltrans project. So, let me see here. So in January 2019, Caltrans initiated the lengthy project development process for the Alamo Pintado Creek Bridge Replacement Project, and currently preliminary design and environmental work are underway right now. So construction is scheduled to begin in fiscal year 2025-26, and past city councils have given conceptual approval of the use of $600,000 in Measure A Solvang circulation improvement funds, plus $600,000 of that Measure A cost savings towards this Caltrans Alamo Pintado Creek Bridge Replacement Project. And this has appeared in our capital improvement program also for the last several years. So Caltrans has indicated that without the 1.2 million contribution from Solvang, they will not include certain features in their bridge replacement project. Specifically, they would not include the road widening and curb and gutter and sidewalk along the north side of Highway 246 between Alamo Pintado Road and the bridge, and also the pedestrian and bicycle connectivity between Alamo Pintado Road and the bridge, between Alamo Pintado Road and the Class 1 bike path that's east of the bridge. So as a result, staff recommends that the City Council approve the cooperative agreement with Caltrans to contribute that $1.2 million in Solvang Measure A funding towards the Caltrans project. And as far as fiscal impact, Measure A includes the $3 million set aside for the Solvang circulation improvements. We're currently using $600,000 of that on the South LSL Road reconstruction project, and so we would. The proposal here is to use an additional $600,000 of that $3 million in Measure A circulation improvements towards this funding contribution. And then SBCAG at the staff level, they have indicated that they support using the $600,000 in Measure A cost savings that was supposed to be for the bicycle pedestrian bridge, since Caltrans would include these type of features, these bicycle and pedestrian features, they agree that that's compatible or whatever, and they anticipate that the board, the SBCAG board would also support and approve that. And so after, if the city council does choose to enter into this agreement with Caltrans, this cooperative agreement, then the next step would be to enter into a cooperative agreement with SBCAG. But they wanted us to first, make the decision as far as Caltrans, and then we'll come back again to you with another staff report and a cooperative agreement with SBCAG. But let me see here. Yeah, so the good news is, if we do enter this cooperative agreement with Caltrans, it's no general fund money whatsoever used. It's all Measure A funding, and the city would be invoiced for the 1.2 million contribution probably early in fiscal year 2025-26. So not for a few years still. And then just to recap again, staff recommends that the city council approve the cooperative agreement with Caltrans to contribute 1.2 million in Solvang Measure A funding towards the Caltrans Highway 246 Alamo Pintado Creek Bridge Replacement Project, and authorize execution of the agreement by the mayor. So that concludes my staff report.
Thank you, Jerry.
Are there any questions of the staff report?
I have a question.
Councilmember Clark?
Charlie, so we enter into an agreement with Caltrans, and then SBCAG says no, where do we go from there?
That's a good question. I thought you might have that question, actually. So that's why, we did confirm with the staff, at the staff level, that they feel it's consistent, the use of the funds is consistent with the original approval. This Measure A cost savings funding. And so it's not likely that that would happen. But if it did, then the result would be, we'd have to come up with that other 600,000, yeah.
Thank you.
Matt, do you know?
Which we could also use our normal local road Measure A funding for as well if we wanted, but it's better to use this. The 600,000 in Measure A cost savings was sort of over and above any other money that we had gotten. It's kind of like a grant, basically.
And your experience with SBCAG, you're comfortable with their pledge, if you will?
Yes,
Okay.
yes, very much. And we did confirm that. I didn't want to bring this to you without some reassurance from them at least at the staff level, that they felt this was they felt comfortable that this was totally consistent, and that they can't speak for their board, but based on their experience working with the board.
Yours and theirs, I get it.
And if you do approve it, we have at least one vote on SBCAG, that's for sure, yes. So.
That's reassuring. Thank you.
I think I can talk a few more into it.
Yeah, okay.
Matt, do you know if it's coming up on the agenda the next week? I haven't seen an agenda for SBCAG.
For SBCAG? No, I think it's gonna be on their September.
On the September meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so it's not really, Caltrans would like an answer, because they're, as I mentioned, moving into they're already actually starting the preliminary design phase and all that. But, so they wanna know what they're gonna design, if they're gonna do the sidewalk and all the curb and gutter and stuff. And the connectivity, the bike path and all that. But once they have an answer, it could just get put on the SBCAG's agenda. So I believe it's for September, but it might be October, but.
I thought T-TAC already agreed to that.
That could be, but I think that's still just like a subcommittee that refers everything back to the agenda, to the main board of directors.
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Any other, Councilmember Infante?
Just a couple quick questions. So the roundabouts are out now, is that correct? We're just doing the bridge?
Correct. So that is an interesting question, because I don't want to take too much credit for myself, but I've been pushing SBCAG for the last 10 years, that they need to be the ones paying for replacing the bridge. And just within the last year, well, no, it was maybe about a year and a half ago. It was January 2019 when several Caltrans staff came out here to kind of initiate the whole process of this project. I said, look, you guys, 10 years ago, you told us we couldn't just replace the bridge. We had to improve the road and upgrade the intersection. We analyzed both the major widening of the intersection with traffic signal upgrades and stuff. And then you said, oh, well, it's so close to Old Mission, you gotta analyze, and upgrade Old Mission intersection. I said, you guys, told us, when we were looking at it, that we needed to do all that. You guys should, uphold the same standard that you're demanding of Solvang and analyze that, and at least Alamo Pintado and Highway 246, maybe not Old Mission, but they said, well, they kind of agreed that it was sort of a double standard, but the only way they can move forward with this project is in their SHOP program, and it's basically kind of like a maintenance program, and because they had all these other issues with the bridge, they could get it approved and do it as sort of, again, under the SHOP program. So, bottom line is they refused to include.
So it's dead.
The only thing is they will be doing ADA upgrades at that intersection. And and the sidewalk along that north side, it'll go from the bridge, past the veterinary office there, and the pawn shop,
Gas
and
station.
the gas station, all the way up. So we'll have nice curb and gutter and sidewalk all along there, and they're planning a connection to the bike path. So on the bridge itself, it may have like a physical, like a permanent type K-rail type of concrete barrier between the travel lanes and the pedestrian and bicycle area on the north. So that's what they've told me. So.
The other question I have is, you said this is not likely to start until 2025. So we got a couple.
That's a construction.
Right. We got a couple years to go. Is there liable to be a price increase with escalation over the couple of years, or are we safe to say 1,200 is it, and Caltrans picks up the rest?
Yeah. So that's a really good question too. So most likely the price will go up, but our commitment will be fixed based on this agreement.
Done.
So we're locked in.
Good.
And they've committed.
That's what I wanted to hear. I'm good.
Yeah. But most likely the price will go up a little bit, yeah.
I would think so, yeah.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions of the staff report? All right, we'll take it out to public comment and any in-house. Mr. Garcia. Mr. Packard. Seeing none, we'll take it out to Zoom. Mr. Lane. I got it right this time. No other comments, bring it back. And for any other final discussion, or I'll entertain a motion.
I move that we accept.
Approve the contract.
Second.
Councilmember Clark,
Yes.
Councilmember Infante,
Yes?
Mayor Pro Tem Arona,
Yes.
Councilmember Thomas,
Yes.
Mayor Urick.
Yes.
Passes 5-0.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. I'll be sure to hold it up until 2025 before I sign it. All right. Item number 9, in your AB 1, 2, 3, 4 reports. For council closing comments.
I have none.
Everybody have a great couple of weeks. We'll see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you for being here. It is 10 o'clock. Council meeting adjourned.